All right, we should be started.
And we haven't technically started yet. I haven't called us to order, but we might have some folks that are now popping up as attendees. I just wanted to check. So it does appear that there are some folks. So we'll wait just a minute. Okay. All right. Okay, well, the recording has started, and I think we've given enough time for folks to join remotely. And so I will get my gavel out and make things official. So good evening. And I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Tumwater Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, May 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. We have one item on the agenda this evening. This is number TUM 210551, involving the request for approval of a preliminary plat to subdivide an approximately 10.72 acre property into 36 single-family lots as a clustered subdivision on property north of Sapp Road Southwest between Anston Street and Crosby Boulevard. My name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearing examiner, and the city has selected me to hold certain land use application hearings like this one. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and the specific requirements for approval of a preliminary plat under the municipal code. And because this would involve the subdivision of land, also ensure that it complies with our state subdivision act, which is in chapter 5817 of the revised code of Washington. To that end, I did receive several exhibits in advance of today's hearing that I had an opportunity to review. And these include a staff report prepared by city staff, various maps detailing where the proposal is being proposed, as it were, the application materials themselves, information on the notice that was provided in relation to the application, as well as today's hearing, some historic information, and I do have familiarity with this property, as I did issue a decision back in, it looks like September of 2019, ultimately denying a request to subdivide this property in the past. So there is historic information related to that. Information on the environmental review that occurred under our state's Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. Some, again, historic information, various reports that were prepared in the past or more recently. Several comments, and we'll get into more detail about that, but quite a few. And earlier, I believe today, I did receive additional comments, and there might even be more that will be introduced today. But I'm certainly aware that there's interest in the proposal, and folks have submitted written comments in advance of the hearing today. And it looks like quite a few folks may be interested in participating, and that will definitely be an option, and there will be that opportunity. So ultimately, I think the number I currently have is 20, and as 20 exhibits, I'm counting the PDF I received earlier today that included several additional comments from members of the public. I had intended on making that one exhibit, calling that exhibit 20, but ultimately that was a 29-page PDF that had comments from, I think, looks like about 9 or 10 additional comments. And then we'll talk when we get to staff's presentation if there are any additional exhibits that they would like me to have admitted into the record. That said, if there are folks that have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll go ahead and address admitting additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, our testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because were my decision to be appealed under our state's Land Use Petition Act, or LUPA, the recording of today's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits and my decision, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. I may and often do ask questions of those that are testifying. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal so that after the record closes, I'm able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. Finally, sort of the order and the procedures that we're going to follow today is first, my plan is to swear in city staff, who will give an overview of the proposal and sort of explain the review process that led us to tonight's hearing. After that, we'll hear from the applicant and anyone on the applicant's team that they would like to call, and that will be their opportunity to present any additional information they feel that myself and members of the public should be aware of. Then members of the public will have an opportunity. There are several folks in the room down, it looks like in the Sunset Room at City Hall, and my intent would be to allow those folks to testify first. And so I think there was a sign-in sheet, and what we'll do is we'll kind of go through that sign-in sheet, and folks will then be able to come up and testify there at the table. I note that again, I am aware of the concerns, and if you have sort of written comments you would hope to read into the record, I in fact would much prefer if you maybe quickly summarize, and then we'll make your written comments an additional exhibit as part of the ultimate record, so that I can then review those comments in more detail at length. But ultimately, I do want to point out that the way this process works is I have criteria that I review that serves as the foundation for my decision. And while the concerns that are raised certainly play a role, it's not a sort of scale where, you know, having a ninth person say something identical from others is not going to tip anything. But if you just want to point out you agree with the comments that your neighbors or other community members made, that's fine. We do try to limit comments to 3 minutes or so, just to ensure that you know, folks aren't here all night. But again, any written comments that you were hoping to read into the record, would prefer procedurally that you summarize them, and then we'll make them an additional exhibit, because ultimately it's myself that makes this decision, and anything that is admitted into the record will become, you know, part of the review, so that if this does get appealed, your written comments will then be an exhibit in the record. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the public. After we hear from folks there in the room, there are several folks that are participating remotely, and so then my intent would be to move to them. We have the raise hand feature enabled, so when we get to that point in the hearing, I will ask folks if they are interested, and they'll have an opportunity. I note that I am not going to be paying attention to that feature until I'm asked to use it, and ultimately, or ask others to use that feature. And ultimately, folks are not going to have an opportunity to do a sort of back and forth multiple comments, not the way this process in particular works. It's a little different than a council meeting. But the idea being, if you have questions, as opposed to specific comments, I would ask folks sort of phrase your question as a comment and say, my name is so-and-so, and I am hoping someone can provide additional information on traffic because I'm worried about that. I will be furiously taking notes while folks testify, and confident that staff will also pay attention, and the applicant hopefully as well. And after we've heard from all members of the public that wanted to participate and provide testimony, I will then turn back to the applicant to hopefully provide any response, as well as city staff. So that's the process we're going to follow, and we'll try to do this as orderly as we can. But with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'll go ahead and get staff sworn in. And I believe Tammy Merriman is presenting on behalf of city staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for being here. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great, thank you. And if you could just state and spell your name for the record and explain your role here at the City of Tumwater.
Sure. My name is Tammy Merriman, T-A-M-I, last name Merriman, M-E-R-R-I-M-A-N. I am the permit manager for the City of Tumwater. It is my job to review development proposals. And today my role is to present to you a staff report for your consideration for approval of a subdivision.
Great, thank you. And did my explanation of the exhibits track hopefully with what you were hoping I would look at? I think, like I said, the number I arrived at, counting that additional PDF that was sent around noon, I am now at 20. Is that a good start?
It's very close.
Okay.
Excuse me. There were 2 PDFs that I sent to you from Mr. Kim. And I think that would have been yesterday.
Okay, let's see. And I think I do have them, and I didn't update my own exhibit list. So that's my problem. Okay. So let's rethink that. So let me make sure. So these were the applicant, Mr. Kim. You're right. Did send them, and I do have them. So why don't I make Mr. Kim's exhibits? Let's start there. Why don't we make those 20 and 21 to start? So we'll say that the first one we'll call the Kim letter to the hearing examiner from May 23rd, 2023. It's a letter with attachments I have as 28 pages. Does that track?
Yes.
Okay, so the Kim, we'll say 5/23 letter plus attachments. We'll make that 20 to start. And then the other one being, in fact, I think an earlier set of attachments, but there's an email chain is what it begins with, and this one's 28 pages. So why don't we just call this the exhibit 21 as the email chain from the applicant with additional materials. Does that make sense?
So both of Mr. Kim's responses are just one exhibit 21?
Sorry, the second one I was saying, at least what I see is an email. It starts as an email chain for me, at least, with an email from May 3rd. So what I was saying is, why don't we make that exhibit 21, which I'll call email chain from applicant dated May 3rd with additional materials. So it'll be ultimately 2 separate documents. So that'd be 20, 21, 22 then would be the set of additional public comments that I'll say received in advance of hearing. 5/24, and then any final additional matters since then that you wanted to admit into the record.
Yes, we received 4 public comments after I sent afternoon today when I sent you the most current ones that had come in. It is a form letter, and all 4 say the same thing. I believe one of the members or one of the persons that wrote that letter is going to be in attendance tonight. Okay. So while I can either show them on the screen, forward them to you as a PDF, I'm not sure how you want to handle those 4 additional.
Sure. Why don't we make that an exhibit? We'll make it exhibit 23, and I'll call it form letter or something once I've seen it. That said, if you're able to send it now, or if Mr. Matlock or someone else, I will be able to pull it up when we get to that point. But we'll make sure that is included as an exhibit as well.
I am going to do that kind of as we speak, I hope.
Okay.
Because there is one last one, and Mr. Kim did, I forwarded him the comments that had come in last minute, and he had provided a response to that also. So that would be, I'm going to guess, exhibit 24.
There you go. Yeah, so we can say exhibit 24 is applicant response to exhibit 23. I may change the name of that later, but for now, it appears that that would be the applicant's response to the information in exhibit 23.
Yes.
And so we ultimately, all the additional exhibits appear to involve quite a bit of comments that have come in and the applicant's response to said comments. And of course, we'll hear from the applicant and members of the public today and ultimately determine the best way forward in terms of, any additional responses to the information that's been provided. But for now, I think we're at 24 exhibits is the universe that we're looking at the moment. Does that track?
That tracks with me.
Excellent. Okay, so
Okay.
with that, I will go ahead and I swore you in already, so I'll let you proceed with the presentation of any kind you intended on giving today.
Okay, thank you so much. I know this is there's a lot of information coming in, and I wanted to make sure I try to get it all. I wasn't able to combine those documents as we were speaking because my brain doesn't function that well, but I promise I will get them to you.
I'm confident we'll make sure everything's in the record, and
Okay.
again, having familiarity with the property, and I hope folks realize that I try to be pretty diligent about ensuring everything comes in, and my decisions tend to be quite long and thorough one way or the other. So I try to make sure all the materials get addressed. So with that, please
All right.
ahead.
I'll go now. The first, I will open up with the fact that I've only been here 2 years. Wow, already 2 years. So a lot of the past history here, I've gleaned information from other employees, from folks I've talked to, Mr. Kim, and read as much as I possibly could. There's going to be a lot of history that I don't necessarily have. So I'll do my best to answer questions and find documentation, but I might not have that historical knowledge that others might have had before me. But I will say that we started out with this application in 2021. In March, Mr. Kim submitted application, and it was for a couple different layouts. And at that time, the density, the way that we determined density, what he had proposed was not going to work. So I worked with Mr. Kim for quite a while. We did a lot of back and forth to get the density figured out and how he could apply for a clustered subdivision. He worked with our transportation engineering department on making sure the road standards were exactly what we needed for road standards. He worked with the engineering department on the stormwater facilities and the geotech reports. So a lot of work was done in the background in the last couple of years. And through this pandemic, it just was crazy with the length of time the engineers took to respond. So while this looks like it's been sitting out there for 2 years, we are finally coming forward with a project that I believe meets our regulations. Part of the background on this was, and I'm sure everybody there in the audience and Mr. Reeves, you all remember the hearing from September 2019 when this plat was denied. It was denied because the way that density, Mr. Kim had proposed density, did not meet how the city calculates density with the removal of critical areas from the overall acreage to determine what density was required. So through that that hearing, the project was denied. There was a request for reconsideration, and that didn't go through either. So Mr. Kim came back to the drawing board. I've worked with him the last 2 years, and now he has reapplied for the subdivision, and he is excluding the critical areas from the density calculation as stated in our code. So he's also providing for a clustered development, which is allowed in Chapter 18 of our zoning code. In that density requirement, it in the zoning where he's located in the residential, pardon me, now I've lost it. The residential resource area is that it's a minimum of 2 units per acre and a maximum of 4 units per acre. However, it has a statement that if the land division is subject to the clustering provisions of that section, and not subject to wetland protection standards, that they can increase the maximum density to be no greater than 125% of the maximum density allowed. In order to achieve a clustered subdivision, there's 4 set of criteria that needs to be met. The first is that open space provided for the subdivision needs to be 30% of the total area of the site. Half of that has to be useful for passive recreational purposes. The area that's set aside for open space is to include the environmentally sensitive areas, such as the steep slopes on site. And then the clustered subdivision follows the rest of the provisions of Chapter 18.
And on that, just so question there, because clearly this is was an issue historically, and one of the matters that I'm certain myself and others had questions or may have questions about. So ultimately, under the current proposal, the municipal code or the city's interpretation of its municipal code is such that when calculating density, we take out the critical areas. So instead of 10.72 as the number we're using to calculate density, we are actually using 7.94, correct? I believe that's the number I'm seeing.
Okay,
here.
I have it somewhere in my staff report, probably.
Okay, but essentially, landslide hazards, according to your staff report and the other reports submitted, are about 1.61 acres, and furthermore, right-of-way easements are 1.17. So ultimately, about 8 acres would be the number to calculate density. So I think that was step 1, correct?
Correct. And I've got those numbers here now. It's 7.94.
Okay. That said, however, it sounds that the city's determined that in terms of calculating, or ensuring that the cluster subdivision requirements are met, the actual site, in terms of that set aside that's required under the clustering, the 30%, that you are, or an applicant is allowed to then use that critical area that was not part of the density calculation. Is that right?
To use it, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. So the density calculation was made by taking 7.94, as the base that was used to calculate what would be technically allowed for density.
Correct.
And then under the clustering provisions, there's a requirement that a certain amount of, critical areas or open space, really open space, passive space be set aside. But my question is, under the code, that the full 10.72 acres is available to make that 30% determination. Is that right? It's a totally independent determination from density calculation. That's my understanding of how staff has viewed this. Is that right?
That's correct. That's
okay.
Correct.
Want to make sure I fully understand that there's a lot of multiplying there, and so I think I grasp the way that this moved forward. So thank you. I apologize. I think I get it. So the idea, just to make sure, is that we start with a 10.72 acre site. We take out the 1.61 acres for steep slopes, being the landslide hazard area, which is critical area. We take out 1.17 acres for the proposed right-of-ways and easements. That gives us a 7.94 acre figure. That figure is then the basis to determine, how many proposed residential lots would be allowed for a density calculation. That calculation has then been made. And then under the clustering provisions of the development code, there's a requirement that 30% be set aside or treated as passive open space. And when making that calculation, in fact, the 1.61 acres that had been excluded from the earlier density calculation is allowed to be considered as part of that 30%. Am I following?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I got that straight. So with that, I will let you continue.
Okay. Just have to figure out where I was in my stuff
I
report.
know, I threw
Okay,
you off.
no, it's okay.
Apologize.
I don't know if you want me to share screen. I can show the map as we're talking. Just, I think that I'll do that. That way I can point, and if you have questions, I can point to where we're at.
Okay.
Can we all see the screen here?
I can. I'm not sure. Is there a screen in the room that has been set up? And I'm getting a nod, it looks like. So hopefully folks in the
Okay.
room can see it. I can see it online for sure.
So I was going to talk about all of those calculations, but you did it
Oh.
so well that I won't go into the great detail. The calculations are in the staff report too, that just said exactly what you did. So we have 36 single family lots and 7 community tracts. What happened is with the when we took out all of those critical areas and the streets and roads, that left that 3.74 acres to do density. And at 4 units per acre, that was 30 single family residences would have been allowed with all of those taken out. And then to provide for the open space, they needed to do 30% of the entire 10.72. So that was 3.22 acres. Doing the 125% of 30 dwelling units, it would have allowed up to 37 dwelling units. And now he's proposing 36.
And that's just to be clear, that number, that's a sort of bonus, as it were, that's allowed through the clustering provisions, correct?
Yes, the clustering provisions, and I'll get into that in just one second, because as we're go through and looking at preliminary plats, we have to look and see how it meets the intent of our comprehensive plan and parks plan and all of the plans within the city. The first one we look at is the Tumwater Comprehensive Plan. This is in the Tumwater Hill neighborhood. The zoning is residential sensitive resource. We already talked about the density of 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre. The comp plan states there's a couple items in there that are really interesting, but in our comprehensive plan in the residential sensitive resource area, there's a statement that says that in addition to it being relatively low density, development in these areas should be clustered. Clustered means a grouping or clustering development into a property so that the remainder can be preserved as unbuilt open space. And the intent of this is to protect the environmental sensitive areas. In doing the clustered subdivision, what happens is you need to provide way more open space. Instead of 10%, it's 30%, but you also have smaller lots. So the lot sizes are 7,600 square feet instead of the 96 that is in the standard subdivision. So in order to get the clustered subdivision, they're smaller lots, which provides the 30% open space and helps protect the environmentally sensitive areas. But along with that clustering provision, it also allows for the density increase because of the smaller lots. So that's the purpose of more open space, but smaller lots and protecting the open space in those environmental areas. So with that, with the open space provided, the clustering application that we're looking at, the staff has found that it's consistent with our comprehensive plan and its zoning and its land use designation. In our parks plan, there's a reference to a desire for a bicycle lane on Sap Road, but there's no other call out for parks in this general area. The city does own property on the other side. It's on the west side of the proposal. There's Percival Creek down here. The city does own property there to protect that critical area too.
And Ms. Merriman, I don't think we can see Sap Road on this, or is it over to the?
Sap Road is right here.
Okay, and that's to the south. Technically, this north is
Yes.
is over to the left. This is not north is up as we often think of,
Right.
which is not real in real life, as we know, but in the what we're looking there, you can point out so folks are oriented. But the idea being the access is Sap Road for Road A, access is off Sap Road or proposed, and that's at the southern most portion of the property, and then it's a sort of strange panhandle, looks like a meat cleaver or something, and that's to the north, the rest of it. Is that an accurate?
That's correct. And if it's helpful, I can rotate the map. It'll make
Nope,
it
just
smaller, but
wanted to, nope, we're good. I just want to make
Okay.
sure it was clear where Sap Road was as it was being discussed. So with that, please
Okay.
continue.
All right. So there's really no other call for a park in this area. So when we're looking at the Parks and Recreation Plan, he's going to provide bicycle lanes on his Sap Road improvements. There'll be payment of impact fees, and that meets the requirements for the park plan. In our transportation plan, this is where it gets a little unique in this development, is that a lot of the environmental review and the transportation review was done in 2019. And looking at this proposal, what he's proposing as opposed to what was in effect in 2019, there was really no change. There was no major change or any impactful change in the SEPA determination or in the transportation trip generation. So I just went ahead and used the existing SEPA because that doesn't expire, and the transportation concurrency ruling because it's the same number of lots and the same trip generation. Then with the transportation plan, it calls for traffic impact fees that will be charged for each single family home and the improvement of Sap Road. I also reviewed this against the Thurston County Regional Trails Plan and the Sustainable Thurston Plan, and we found no inconsistencies with those plans. As a housekeeping item, I just want to make sure that we put on record that public notice of this this preliminary plat was mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the site. Various agencies posted on the site and on the website, and published in the Olympian on March 10th, 2023. This notice was an amended notice from the one from way back in 2021. After we worked through, we had done the initial notice. Then we found out that the density just didn't work. So he came back to the drawing board with the new one. I issued an amended notice of application. This amended notice application also included the fact that the SEPA threshold was already complete and that we were incorporating that by reference. And then publication of the public hearing was mailed to property owners and various agencies. Anybody that provided written comments on the notice of application received the notice of the public hearing. It was posted and then it was published in the Olympian on May 12th. This are we okay?
Sorry, yes, we were fine. I don't know, maybe I'll wait till you conclude. I do have questions about SEPA, but we can wait
Okay.
until the end, maybe, I think.
Then my next part of my staff report was the SEPA State Environmental Policy Act, pardon me. And that the review was done in 2019, and the determination of non-significance was issued at that time. Along with the transportation concurrency. And in the SEPA, in the WAC rules 197.11.230, number 3, we are incorporating the original SEPA documentation because the impacts of the project and the project layout is pretty much basically the same as it was.
Ms. Merriman, I don't know if it was just on my end. Maybe I can have someone in the room verify. I just had a weird kind of in and out from the audio as you were saying what the WAC was, but was that just my computer or did same issue or no?
We heard it okay over here.
Okay, just me. Okay, I think I'll be okay. I apologize for interrupting. I just want to ensure that we have a clear record. But that said, you were talking about the Washington Administrative Code, the WAC rules. And in something I assume in chapter 197, but if you could repeat that part of it for me, that would be very helpful.
It is the Washington Administrative Code 197-11-230, section 3.
Okay, 197.11.233, 230 sub 3.
Sub 3, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And that the project was not changed substantially. We can just incorporate that document into this review.
Okay.
We didn't have to redo the SEPA and issue the same determination over again. Into chapter or title 18, our zoning code, single family dwelling units are allowed. We've already discussed the density of the clustering subdivision and 125% of the maximum density that would be allowed. Some of the standards for development in this code is building heights are limited to 35 feet. The clustering subdivision provides for a minimum lot size of 7,600 square feet. When doing that, there's in that section of code, there's two different setback requirements. So for lots that are less than the standard of 9,500 square feet in area, the setbacks in the front yard are 20 feet. Side yard setbacks are 7.5 feet, and the rear yard setbacks are 10 feet. Okay, I'm scrolling through here. I'm so sorry. The other part of the zoning section is it's also located in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, and that which restricts certain land uses, and single-family homes or single-family residences are not prohibited in that overlay zone. Chapter 18 requires that we have an inadvertent discovery plan for development, so that if for some strange reason, or if for any reason, I shouldn't say strange, I'm sorry, if any reason there's an unanticipated discovery of protected cultural material, that they have a plan on who to contact and to stop work immediately and contact the appropriate jurisdictions. For preliminary subdivisions, the hearing examiner has the authority to review and approve, review and make a determination on the preliminary plat. Jumping into other sections of the code that apply to this is the tree and protection replacement ordinance, in that our ordinance requires that a minimum of 20% or 12 trees per acre be retained during any portion of development. The applicant has provided a forester's plan that shows there's approximately 353 trees on site that would meet the regulation. He's proposing to keep at least 167 trees for retention, which is greater than the 12 trees per acre. So he meets the tree and vegetation ordinance requirements. We do know that there's geological hazardous areas on the site with a steep slope. The proposal provides for protection of the steep slope and buffers around each one where there's no buildable areas. He meets the regulations for development in the critical areas of the steep slope. Title 17 requires that the public use and interest proposed to be served by the development be met. And in reviewing that, we need to make sure that provisions are made for public health, safety, and general welfare. That includes the amount of open space that's provided as part of a plat, pardon me, which this one is proposing the 30%. Public streets comply with the current development guide. He's got public streets serving both sides and Sap Road. We were not able to get the connection through, which actually kind of helps divide up the traffic, so all the impacts aren't going to one side. Storm drain needs to meet the city's 2022 drainage design manual. Sanitary sewer and water will be extended into the property. The site is served by the Tumwater School District, and I'm going to talk about that in just one second, and then served also by the Tumwater Fire Department. The school district in 2019 had requested that the applicant provide a bus stop. I don't know that it's necessarily shown on this plan because of all the different iterations that we've gone through, but that is a condition of approval that we did carry over from 2019. Before I get to public comment, there is a list of conditions, recommended conditions in the staff report, and there is a list of 49. So instead of reading each condition, I won't do that to everybody. I do want to make sure that we all are aware that some of the main concerns are with the steep slopes and development here is the blasting that may occur and in order to get the development to move forward. Blasting permits are required. The city does have a permit process to do this. The blasting permit requires that the adjoining properties are notified. They have to carry a heavy insurance I don't have it all in front of me, but we have a process for this, and we've actually recently gone through it with a residential development or a multifamily development off of Barnes Road. And it worked very, very well with the impacts to the neighbor, notifying them, doing the reports, providing the insurance in case there's an issue. So the city does have a process for that. Wanted to make sure.
Oh,
we're all-
okay. And I that vaguely is familiar to me. I think maybe I had presided over a hearing and that had come up and there was
Yes,
concern over blasting and so nice to hear that maybe I didn't screw that up. So thank
no.
you. Uh, just okay. Sorry. Let me let you finish before I dive in with the questions. I apologize. Go right ahead.
There's a few small items. Residential fire sprinklers may be required to be installed on some of the homes on the steep slope if the fire department cannot get up with their rigs to be able to serve them. That's a unique situation here. And I thought there was another. We worked really hard, like I said, behind the scenes with the applicant and our transportation engineering department to make sure that the roads meet our standards in our development guide. We've got fire protection. Oh, so there is a water main assessment. There's a water main that he will be connecting to. There's a assessment of $12,216 to connect to that water main. Make sure the applicant knows about that.
And sorry, on that'd be sort of a maybe a late comers agreement or some kind of, is that right? Okay, so it's
Yes.
essentially this development needs to pay its fair share of whatever costs are associated with that when it occurred, so that
Yes.
the property owners in the vicinity that have been that have already paid don't have to pay more, and it's the idea being latecomers are allowed as long as they pay an appropriate amount. Basic
Correct.
idea. Okay, just making sure I get what we're talking about.
Yes, plat name reservation certificate needs to be re-upped with the Thurston County Auditor's Office. It just recently expired. And there's the condition for the school district bus stop and a bus stop ahead sign. Those were kind of the highlights of the conditions. The rest are very pretty standard about meeting stormwater regulations, providing for streets, and the required infrastructure and development requirements when civil plans are submitted. That's pretty much what I have before we jump into public comment.
Sure, maybe before that, and if Mr. Matlock is the better person, that's fine. This is an issue I myself struggle with, and I've had it come up, and I don't think in the city of Tumwater, but I know it came up in Cloud County just in the last few months. And it's this question of using existing environmental documents. And certainly I agree that the Washington Administrative Code, the WACs, encourage the use of existing documents. My question becomes, though, if I were an interested member of the public, could I have appealed SEPA or not? To the extent that, when you use it, when you, was there a notice and adoption process where notice was provided to the SEPA registry so that DOE and other agencies that get notification of things that are put on the register are able to comment? I certainly understand that we have a number of lots, 36, that is identical to the number I believe that was proposed in 2019 or before that, but when I made my decision, and I know my decision was appealed or ultimately I think the LUPA appeal was withdrawn. I don't recall if there was a SEPA appeal concurrent with my decision by any members of the public or not, but I guess my question, sorry, I'm long-winded here. My question as I'm thinking out loud is, while I certainly understand the concept of using existing environmental documents, would there have been a possibility to appeal SEPA or not? And any information you can give on that, or if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I would be wary of moving forward if there was a major procedural issue to that extent. Hopefully that made sense, Tammy Merriman, and any thoughts you have, or if the SEPA responsible official, Mike Matlock, is available, but whoever you think is the right person.
Well, in a past jurisdiction that I worked with, we incorporated by reference SEPA documentation, SEPA determinations for a project if the project was not changed. It's the same applicant, it's the same project. We just were out for a while looking at impacts and trying to make something work, and then we came back. So it is the same project pretty much as it was before, except for the fact the clustering. And in looking at the existing environmental documents and the clustering, I felt that the impacts were the same or less than before, and so felt that the incorporating the environmental documents was allowed through the WAC.
Oh, well, that I understand. I guess procedurally though,
Oh.
there would not have been an opportunity now, right? For the new version that is apparently very similar, there wouldn't have been an option to appeal the SEPA. Is that correct?
That's correct. The notice of application did state that these environmental documents were going to be used and incorporated into the decision,
Okay. So,
but not an option for comment and appeal.
okay, so the idea being this is so similar to the previous project that was not appealed under SEPA, that city staff is confident that the existing environmental determination, which I believe was a DNS determination of non-significance, meaning there were no required mitigation measures, was sufficient, and any sort of appeal ought to have happened previously, and any concern would have been the same now as it was then, meaning no reason for further bites at that particular apple. And the fact that clustering is being used here the layout hasn't really changed, apparent, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't have it memorized what it looked like previously, but is that the basic concept?
That is my basic concept. And then the fact that they're actually providing more open space and more protection of the environment, that I didn't feel that the impacts were any greater.
Okay, and I would like to hear from Mike Matlock if he's available. Oh, geez, I apologize. Hold on. I didn't realize those two devices were connected. I apologize. One sec, folks. That is embarrassing. I got a new phone and I have not fully figured out all my products seem to talk to each other and it causes problems. I apologize, folks. I know that it's airplane. There we go. Okay, apologies. Okay. And again, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to cause issues here. I just want to make sure the process wise that it's clear what occurred and that the city is confident that there was no need, as it were, for any kind of additional potential SEPA comment period. Again, and to be clear, I understand the idea of using or adopting or incorporating previous documents. It's a question of, does that then trigger any kind of further comment or period or not? That's kind of where I was headed there. And it sounds, Tammy Merriman, that your response has been using under the WACs. The city determined that no, in this particular case, everything is so similar that essentially it would have been a completely duplicative process, such that it would be inappropriate to have a further comment and appeal period. Is that an accurate Okay, with that.
That's how
one-
I read it.
Okay, I'll have Mike Matlock though, because we do happen to have the city's SEPA responsible official on hand. We'll get him sworn in. Mike Matlock, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could state and spell your name for the record and explain your role or roles, we're going to hear in one particular role, but I know you have more than one hat you wear, but please.
Certainly. Michael Matlock. My last name is spelled Matlock. I'm the Community Development Director for Tumwater and the SEPA responsible official.
Great, thank you. So hopefully my question made sense, meaning that, in 2019, you issued a determination of non-significance or DNS for the earlier iteration of the project that I ultimately did deny. And now we're here. So with that, your thoughts or ideas on SEPA in relation to today, 2023.
Certainly. Yeah, I think Tammy summed it up pretty well. We analyzed this project against the last project. And if there'd been any hint that this new project had more environmental impacts than the previous one, we would have required a new SEPA determination. We didn't see that. In fact, as Tammy mentioned, we think this proposal actually has less environmental impact than the previous one. So requiring a new SEPA determination would have been duplicative and we think contrary to WAC 19711.
Okay. And so in terms of process, there's an entire, this, I'm confident, but part 6 of the chapter of WAC 19711 is the chapter on using existing environmental documents. And there's some guidance there and there's procedures again, where I struggle is because I certainly run into situations where existing documents are adopted or there's an amendment or, where ultimately there's no change or there's a reissuing, but this is one of the more unique situations wherein essentially we are moving forward as if SEPA is not, it's not that this is a categorically exempt project. It's not. This was reviewed in 2019, determined that there would be no significant environmental impacts, ergo a DNS was issued. And even though there's been change to the extent that clustering is being used, the actual environmental impacts are such that they're identical or potentially less or fewer environmental impacts. But the layout and everything else is so comparable that city staff determined no additional round of SEPA would be appropriate. Meaning SEPA is not meant to be something that has multiple opportunities to occur. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to make sure I fully understood what you and Ms. Merriman are hoping to convey. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's correct. We didn't see any substantive change in the latest subdivision that would lead us to believe that environmental review hadn't been completed properly the first time, and there's no substantive reason to do so again.
Great. Okay. Anything further than you wanted to share in relation to SEPA, or in fact anything else while I have you on screen in relation to this project?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you for being available, Mr. Matlock. We might have questions for you later, but for now, I'll go back to Tammy Merriman. Thank you.
I'll be here.
Okay, great. With that, our planner, Tammy Merriman, thank you. So I think I have asked the questions on that, and then I think the concurrency, that was what you referred to as the transportation review, but under our, well, maybe quickly, can you just if you're able to, just very quickly explain concurrency, that review, just so for folks that, don't do this 20 billion hours a month like some of us.
So, sure, concurrency, I'm going to say I've heard it described differently in different jurisdictions and by different planners. For me, concurrency has always been that we need to make sure that the infrastructure needed for a development is available at the time the impact occurs. So when I'm looking at concurrence, well, when our transportation manager looks at concurrency for traffic, we need to make sure that the roads that the traffic are going on are capable to handle the number of trips, that the level of service that the city has determined for specific intersections are not reduced to such a limit that it fails the intersection, or to a level of service that was not acceptable to the city. Concurrency for water and sewers, we require that the applicant get a water and sewer certificate of availability, so we can make sure that water and sewer is available to the property, to the development as it occurs. Concurrency for, it's not necessarily listed in our code, but making sure that their school district has capacity for students, making sure the fire department is able to provide service to the facilities. To me, the concurrency is that the infrastructure needed for development is available at the time the impact occurs or within 6 years.
And moreover, that there's an assessment to ensure that, appropriate fees also are kind of
Yes.
play into that. But the idea, I agree with your explanation to the extent that the one that more often than not comes up, not always, but traffic is a big
Yes.
one. The idea being that, there have been no significant changes or not significant enough. Well, especially because of the pandemic in terms of traffic, we kind of had a lull there. But between the reviews, the TIA or transportation impact analysis or any of that occurred in 2018-19 for the earlier iteration, such that the city determined there was no need to redo all of those studies. And I think some of the other earlier studies were again reused, i.e. the tree study, meaning no development had occurred. So, as far as we're aware, there had not been a giant, fire or something that changed, that. But in terms of concurrency, that was what you were talking about in terms of, transportation review is what you had referenced. Am I following?
Absolutely. The only thing I would add maybe to what you said was in regards to transportation, when we look at trip generation and determine concurrency, what we do when we're looking at the trips generated onto the transportation system, the city has a list of pipeline projects that we know are going to be built. They've been applied for, maybe they have approval but haven't built yet. So in 2018, 2019, while maybe there's some new development that's being built today, those reviews or those applications were in review or approved at that time. So the Forest Park multifamily, there's apartments over there, the something 80. Those were all approved and or in review at the time that this came through. So those things that we see are building now were in the pipeline project and our pipeline traffic and taken into consideration when this transportation concurrency occurred.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. So I know I got us off track. I think we were at the point where you were going to discuss sort of the public comments and potential concerns that have been raised and maybe summarize those to some extent. Is that right?
I'll summarize very briefly. I will say that the public comments we received, I'm not going to pull each single one out, but there was 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. There was 12 letters that requested a seismic study. Their form letter that folks had filled out, not form letter, they're all the same letter, but they were requesting the same thing. They want to be able to have the seismic inspection before any blasting occurs. They want to have the notification. They want a post inspection. So those letters were received by several. A couple of the other letters that came were our local tribes, which said that they had no comment or concern for cultural reasons. So having those kind of knowing that they're there, some of the main things that I really heard and read in the many public comment we received was the concern for blasting, which I kind of did already speak about the fact that we have the blasting permit. It does require public notice. It does require that the applicant carry insurance. It does require that inspections can be made if requested. So I do believe that the blasting portion of their concerns is covered under existing application processes. There's concern about the loss of privacy, about buffering between the uses. And that, as much as I understand it and I really feel for homeowners when we're in this situation, however, when looking at what is being proposed here and knowing that GMA is specifically set up so that we have urban density in the urban areas and protect the rural areas, that this development is consistent with our comprehensive plan, and that those issues are met through GMA and our comp plan. Just trying to think of what the other. There was several folks who had concerns about stormwater runoff and the fact that to the west, I think my screen is still up, isn't it? To the
It is.
west, sorry, there's water runoff that occurs to some of these properties down here. And they were concerned that additional impervious surface was going to create more runoff. So what we have is any of the new impervious surfaces with the streets are required to go and be piped to the stormwater system to be treated into the ground. So and then into the single family homes and the rooftops, that stormwater runoff is put into individual dry wells. So all the new impervious surface should all go to stormwater facilities. And while there is, when you're at the bottom of a hill, you tend to receive the water that comes down the hill. This may actually reduce some of that water come off. I can't say that, I'm not an engineer, but just knowing that these impervious surfaces are going to stop some of the water from coming down and actually direct it to stormwater facilities.
And to that end, we do have a sort of new stormwater site plan specific to 2023, right?
Yes.
Instead of, I guess what I'm saying is, as opposed to previous
Yes.
review that occurred, this has been assessed or addressed, sorry. And I guess to that end, just so I ask, the stormwater manual and how stormwater is being treated, there hasn't been, what manual or what version are we under? I don't recall if the city has changed or adopted anything new in the last few years, but any explanation?
Yes, it's the 2022 Drainage Design Manual for the city of Tumwater. And because there was a little bit of change in the road curve and so forth, we required that their engineer go back and make sure that with the change in pavement, that the stormwater facilities met the 2022 manual. So
okay.
their engineer did go back and take a look at that and make sure that it was still, what they're proposing is adequate.
Well, and I guess the way I would think about it and is that I have yet to see a single instance where new versions of engineering manuals have less public safety protections, et cetera, and environmental protections. So the idea is a 2022 manual now exists.
Mhm.
And this project has to meet that manual, not whatever manual was in place with the 2019 version of the project. Is that there was no vesting? We don't get to pretend like nothing's happened in the last few years. Am I getting that right?
You're correct. Yes.
Okay. So the new version, and again, it's Exhibit 17, I believe, the stormwater site plan, that needs to meet the most recently adopted drainage manual that is being employed by the city.
Yes.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We did have, pardon me, property owner to the south that was a little concerned about some of the lines that were showing up on this map. You'll find that, I think you might have seen that in the comments provided by Mr. Kim, but there's some lines down here on one of these. there's a dotted line. This is kind of an extension of some critical area that's showing up here that is not a property line. So they were confused that this might be considered a property line, and that one of these dotted lines was incorrect. And these dotted lines are supposed to depict the adjoining property lines, and one of these is not correct. So Mr. Kim actually worked with the property owner. The request was that this be cleaned up at final plat. I had wanted to make that a condition of approval, that we make sure that the map shows correct boundary lines on the adjoining properties in the final plat map if you feel it needs to be a condition of approval. However, Mr. Kim and the property owner talked about the discrepancies, and that property owner was satisfied with Mr. Kim's response.
Well, just to be clear, so the concern has to do with the sort of lines not related to this project. These are
Correct.
okay, so I would just say that no, I would be wary of having a condition of approval that requires something to happen off property that I'm not requiring because it has an impact on this property project. So I would not do that, and you haven't proposed it. And again, just for folks involved, I have not made a decision here, and you know, but there's been no suggestion at this point that that be done. But I thank you for explaining what happened there. And Mr. Kim, it sounds like, has worked with the property owner to ensure that that issue's a non-issue, as it were. Right. Okay.
Yes, and
thank
I just, you know,
yeah, I know. Evening hearings, I sometimes it's you know, but please go right ahead.
so the last thing that I'd like to do, and this is the several letters that came in at the last minute before the hearing, they included the information that some of the others was requesting the pre-blasting seismic study post. They also had questions about how the previous from 2019 in the, well, it says we have questions of how the previous petition from 2019 and the appeal in 2021 clearly states that clustering wouldn't be allowed. I think I explained how that worked at the beginning of the my staff report, but when that person, if they want to come and do it, the public comment, I can address that a little bit further. They're concerned about setbacks and wanting to have additional setbacks and landscape vegetation to protect the neighbors. Somebody's asked about a wetland study. I didn't know that there was no indication that there was any wetlands on site. Being steep slope and bedrock, it would have surprised me to know that there would be a wetland on site, and there was none indicated. And then they talked about concerns they had with transportation on Sap Road. Those are the ones that we haven't seen yet. So I just wanted to kind of bring those out.
Okay. Meaning, does that wrap it up? I apologize.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's the public comments. I know it. I really made it very brief, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm disregarding the comments, because there was a lot and there's a lot to deal with. I just kind of wanted to give the overview to allow time for people to speak.
Thank you. And I you know, I have read the staff report and I have read most of the comments. There are some new ones just recently that have come in. I have not yet read, but I do promise folks that I will be diligent about that. And if there ever was an instance where I can truly, hopefully people recognize that there's not a rubber stamp process here, I have denied a similar project in the past. So clearly, you know, I am going to very, very carefully consider this, especially in light of what has occurred in the past. And my decision is included in the record as an exhibit. And so I've been trying to wrap my mind around changes and what's different or not, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, with that, you know, I may have more questions ultimately, but I think I agree that at this point, the best way forward would be to hear from our applicant to start. And then perhaps take a very brief break after that and then come back to do our public comments at that point. So thank you to city staff. And with that, I believe the applicant is there at the table. Mr. Kim, I think is there at the table.
Yes, thank you for opportunity to speak in
Great.
front of you.
And I'm going to swear you in, and
Well,
maybe we can stop sharing screen at this point, Tammy Merriman. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth
Yes.
in the testimony you give here today?
Yes,
Thank you. And if you could state and spell your name for the record.
first name is C-H-U-L, middle initial M, last name is K-I-M.
Okay, Chul Kim, thank you very much for being here. And you're the property owner and the applicant, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is your opportunity to present any additional thoughts or ideas.
Yes, well, I was very disappointed when my last application was denied. But looking back, I am actually glad that I have this opportunity to submit a new site plan, which allow me to leave all the steep slope intact without including within the home site. So that will have a less environmental impact. And I'm glad that even without including any of the steep slope within the home site, that I am able to come up with the same number of lots as proposed before. And other thing I'm happy with this site plan is that I am not putting in connecting street between two cul-de-sac as was done during the first site plan approval in 2005. Because the site plan approved in 2005 required thorough street, construction of thorough street from Woodland Drive to the Sap Road. Construction of that thorough street through steep hillside with the basalt rock underneath was the main reason the cost of site improvement was so high. But because I do not need to build a connecting road between two cul-de-sac, that means that I do not need to blast all the rock through steep hill, because to build a roadway, public roadway, you have to have a grade not more than 50%. So that means that all this slope, excess of 15%, have to be blasted away. So
Sure. So
this change, yes.
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Kim. So you're saying that with the current proposal, essentially, and I don't know exactly the topography, I don't have it in front of me, but because essentially we've got one set of homes, that is a cul-de-sac, and then that comes off Sap, and then the other set that comes off, I think, Woodland Drive, by not
Yeah.
having these two connect,
exactly.
there's, you hope, or the indication seems to be there would be fewer environmental impacts, but also
Well-
costs, but also far less blasting, because instead of having to somehow engineer a road that is not this
Exactly.
steep, just, okay, I'm
Not
making
too
sure I
steep.
understood. I think I understood the point.
And also, by not having thorough street, that also helps the people residing north of this project with less traffic from Crosby Boulevard to Sap Road, because some people may want to take a shortcut if I build a through street.
And
So,
if I remember right, Mr. Kim, I think maybe a lawyer for the HOA of that neighborhood made that comment last
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
2019, or had concerns.
Yeah,
Your-
exactly. Exactly.
Your point
Commented,
is now there wouldn't be the option for the through traffic because of
exactly,
connection from Sap.
exactly. That helps.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps the people residing northward with less traffic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Please
So
continue.
Yeah. So actually, even though I waited this long, because this project, if and when built, will serve homeowners for next many decades, I feel that I'm happy that that this project, the way it's designed, will be better for everybody.
Okay.
Better for everybody.
Sure. Did
Yeah.
that conclude your comments?
Yes.
So just to be clear, for the first time in the history of my career, someone's glad I denied a project of their own. Is that right? It's a bad joke.
That is true.
But
I'm glad that I didn't Yes. that's
okay.
true.
All right. But no, so to be clear, in terms of the record, I know that there's been back and forth just today even. I have not yet read the very final, what I think of as the final exhibit that I want to include as an exhibit, but you yourself, I believe, provided some ideas or thoughts just earlier this afternoon that I wanted to make exhibit 24. And you had also provided some additional emails that I received, emails, attachments, a letter yesterday. But I just want to make sure, are you in agreement with my explanation of what I think the exhibits are? So essentially, you had a letter you made or prepared, I think, dated yesterday, and you had some attachments. Before that, you had sort of an email chain with attachments, and I had made that an exhibit. And then today you submitted a response to an additional letter. So essentially, it looks like in my review, there were 3 additional exhibits you were hoping to have included as part of my record, and I have identified those as what will become the exhibits 20, 21, and 24. Is that what you were hoping? I just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yes, I received about a dozen comments from neighbors, and that's why I prepared all those additional comments and emailed to your office.
Sure. So that you think though
Yes.
that I'm right in what you were hoping to have me look at, is that right? It seems accurate.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. And then I don't believe I had any further questions specifically for you at this time, but did you have anything further you wanted to share, or others you wanted to call on to testify?
Not unless you have any other further questions.
There may be questions after we've
Okay.
heard from the public, but what I would suggest, do you happen to maybe have a pen and paper, or if not, maybe we can get you a pen and paper, but
So I do pen and paper.
okay,
Yes.
we're gonna have you move, I think, is where are
Thank you.
folks testifying, by the way? Just in the room there. Is that the spot? Okay. But so I think Mr. Kim's off screen, he can hear me, but I'm asking that, he pay attention to the extent that if there are he should pay attention to the comments, thoughts, ideas. I think I do like to take a break at the 90-minute point. I would say at this point, it's 8:20. Folks, I'd be happy to do that now before we do public comment. That might make the most sense for folks to maybe use the facility. So why don't we do that? I appreciate everyone's patience, and I want to stress again that there's an option to, have instead of reading something, to have written comments. But why don't we come back at 8:30, and at that point we'll dive into our public comments. But I want to give folks an opportunity to use the facility. So we'll come back on in 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody. And testing, testing. You hear me in the room okay?
Hard to hear you, Andrew.
How about now?
I can hear you now.
Normally my voice is so loud, even from the city of Tacoma, folks in Tumwater hear me just when I'm talking. I get complaints sometimes, but with that, I'll go ahead and get us, it looks like we're recording, but we'll go back on the record. And I note that we are here in the city of Tumwater in front of the hearing examiner related to a proposed preliminary plat, and this is number TUM 210551. We took a quick break for folks to use the facilities, and my 23-pound judicial assistant, Rosie, appreciates that. And now we're going to hear from members of the public. And my intent, I believe there was a sign-in sheet there in the room. And we're going to start with those folks. I know there are folks also that would like to testify that are participating remotely. Out of courtesy, I try to do the folks in the room first because they don't have an opportunity to eat something or watch TV on the side. So we'll start with the folks in the room. But with that, maybe you can bring up our first person interested in testifying.
Absolutely. So Darren Rice. And Mr. Hearing Examiner, would you like me to start a timer of any sort, or are you just, we're just letting it go and you'll
I will be as polite as possible in trying to get folks to limit their comments to approximately 3 minutes. It is not as formal as it were as a council meeting. The rules are slightly different, but clearly it's an evening, it's late, and there are lots of folks interested. And I do note again that I have a lot of familiarity with the site, with the project. And I have reviewed comments and I will very much take them into consideration. But maybe informally, I'm trying to track the 3-minute concept myself. But with that, no need for a blinking light. I know when I argue in front of the court, that always drives me nuts. So with that, Mr. Rice, thank you. Your name is familiar. I think you participated last go round, but I'll get you sworn in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
And you're the first, so I'll use you as my example. I don't need your addresses, but I'll have everyone state and then spell their name for the audio. But in the sign-in sheet, if you didn't do it, it's helpful for staff if you provide your email or a way to get your info. I don't want you to have to give that over a public forum, but if you write it down, that'd be great. So with that, Mr. Rice, if you could state and spell your name for me.
Yeah, I'm Darren Rice, D-A-R-I-N, Rice, R-I-C-E.
Great, thank you so much for being here. So please, here's your opportunity to testify.
Yeah, I'll be brief. We're part of the record already. We're one of the people that have the stormwater concern with the runoff, and we're worried that development is going to make a problem that we already have worse. This hill, the whole proposed property, is literally a water conveyor, and we happen to be the recipient, I think, at the low point of a lot of that water in the winter. It's gotten worse over time as we've had more and more extreme events. In fact, we actually have a seasonal stream that runs off of that property onto ours. And so I guess my comments and my questions are, encouraged by the idea of the new stormwater plan helping with this. Wondering if there's actually a hydrological study that helps inform the stormwater requirements. I mean, do we actually know where the water is coming off? And is there a plan then to, put the stormwater retention features in a smart place? I'm assuming the answer to that is yes. Another question or comment I have is there actually going to be stormwater retention features or ponds in addition to just, storm sewers on the roads? And is the goal to actually not have runoff coming off of this developed property? Or is it just a hope that doesn't happen? And then a last sort of comment or question that relates to this a little bit is, the road that comes in off of SAP, you know, our property line is literally, it looks like on the map, right on there. I'm wondering about the actual setback from the property line to the street. I thought we read something in one of the papers, it was 25 feet, but when I look at the map, it looks like it's really, really not 25 feet. So those are my comments and questions. I appreciate the chance to voice them.
Great. So real quick, Mr. Rice, so I believe you would be to the west. Your property, is that right?
Yes.
And I think you described it in your comments as your property receives the lion's share of water runoff, and I certainly understand the idea. And so your question is there been a hydrological study or some engineering study that is, being reviewed or will happen to ensure we know, kind of what runoff looks like now and how development would impact that to ensure there are no negative or detrimental impacts on yours and other adjacent properties? That was, I believe, the first. Second, your question was, are there actual any specific features, i.e. a stormwater retention vault and anything to that effect or something like that being proposed on site, or is it that all the water gets collected and fed to the municipal system in one way or the other? Correct?
Correct?
Okay, and then the third,
Yep, right on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said right on.
Oh, okay, good. And then the third issue you had to do with the setback. Maybe you can clarify. So your concern there was when you talk about the setback, maybe clarify what you were trying to convey to me there. What you said, 25 feet. I'm trying to
I thought,
visualize it.
yeah, I thought we read in there that there was supposed to be 25 feet from a rear property if there's a street. But when I look at the map, at least as we saw it on the screen, it almost looked like the road was like right up against our property line. And I could be misinterpreting that.
Sure. And one sec, Tammy Merriman, can you maybe put that plan back up? I think that might help me and help Mr. Rice explain kind of, me understand, and hopefully Mr. Rice explain what his thought is. Okay, so again, I don't need to know exactly where your property is, but you're saying, are you referring to Road A, identified as Road A, and your concern has to do with where would the setback be, or essentially your concern is that road abuts the western property line without a setback. Is that the concept, Mr. Rice?
Yeah, and I can't tell whether the line in the middle of Road A is like a line division or if that's actually a setback line.
And
I guess my question is, how much distance between our property line and that road will there be?
Sure, and by road, just so we're clear in our language, it's not so much the right of way, meaning how much easement or space is set aside, it's the actual pavement and kind of where the cars are. Is that the concept?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
We'll try to get answers absolutely for you when we get to that point, but I think I fully understand what the question and the concern is.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rice. Okay, we'll move on.
Can I answer for him?
Nope, what we're gonna do, there's a process. Hold on, Mr. Kim, I will certainly have you talk, but we're gonna hear from everybody and then I'll have you talk out. Okay. And we can bring the plan off again, but if we can bring up the next person, that'd be great.
Yep, Denise Rice?
Oh, I'm with him.
Okay, you, okay,
Thank you.
yep. Brian, McNabb,
I have no comment at this time.
okay. Ricky Fryer?
Front center post.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
All day long. Yes,
All day
sir.
long, all right. And if you could just state and spell your name,
Day
for me,
long.
sir.
Ricky, R-I-C-K-Y, middle initial L for Lawrence, last name Fryer, F as in Foxtrot, Romeo, Yankee, Echo, Romeo.
All right, FRIAR, Ricky L. Fryer, thank you for being here.
FR, Romeo, boss.
I think I
Romeo.
got that. Ricky, one more, the last name then, one more time.
FR, Y,
Foxtrot
E,
Romeo,
R.
IA Romeo, yeah?
Yankee. Yes, sir. Echo,
Gotcha.
Romeo.
Echo,
Okay,
Echo,
cool.
I did mess that up. All right, I think I got it now. Please go
There
ahead.
you go. All right. Yeah, my biggest concerns, I have two, but my first question is, when Miss Tammy spoke about the survey on our homes, are they gonna be paid by Mr. Kim before and after the blasting? That's my biggest concern.
Sorry, one more time. So when you're saying the,
Okay. Yeah, Tammy spoke of the surveys of the blasting of our homes prior to the blasting and prior after the blasting.
okay, so
Will,
I guess I didn't fully understand the idea of a survey. My understanding, and I'll certainly get Tammy Merriman to speak to this at the end, after we've heard from folks. But you're hoping for some clarification on what the process is, how it works, were this to be approved.
Who's
because
paying
I've
for
not
it?
made a decision, but,
who's paying for it?
got it, okay.
Right. Yes, sir.
I'm confident it's not going to be you and other owners, but I will let her speak to what that looks like. But I can confidently tell you that neighboring property owners are not going to have to pay for any kind of surveys or further studies that occur. That's going to be the responsibility of the applicant. But we will certainly get more
Okay.
information.
Okay. And we'll get that in writing sometime soon before.
Whatever is decided, it'll be very clear in my decision, and
Yes, sir. Okay.
so that'll be what, again, I haven't, that's only if I approve this. I have not approved this. and
Right,
this is-
right.
okay.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Good.
And the second thing I wanted to talk about is on Brookside. Are they using Brookside entry to go up the hill to the rear?
Brookside, sorry.
Yeah, Brookside is the other option of Somerset Hill, the other entryway to Somerset Hills. Are they going up Brookside, which is a hill, from Crosby to Brookside?
And one sec, while I am familiar with Tumwater, I am not as familiar as folks that live right in the vicinity. Tammy Merriman, is it possible to maybe pull up something that shows me the bigger picture? I don't know if there's an exhibit or there. Oh, that's great. Okay, so the question had to do with access.
Right, sir.
And
Up
I'm
that
gonna
road.
let Tammy Merriman
they
actually
going up-
cut in real quick. So one sec, Mr. Fryer. So Tammy Merriman, can you speak to this issue specifically?
So the proposed access on the north of this is through Woodland Drive. I am going to imagine maybe Brookside would be used often, depending on where they go. They have also Delrose to get out onto Crosby.
Okay, I now see.
So
So can we go down south, I suppose, on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that and Ms. Merriman, that big empty area there is what we're looking at is for there, a meat cleaver, as I described it. And so the question was, so I think Mr. Fryer is hopefully clear, access wise, there's a certain number of lots. Access is proposed essentially off Crosby, Brookside, down Woodland, or however one would do that, but X number of lots, half or more than half, I believe actually, would receive access that way. And then can we go even further down on this or not?
sorry,
There-
it takes a
there-
second to build.
And then Sap Road is for the other set would receive access, but then the two, there's no connection between the two. It's essentially two cul-de-sacs, no road connection. There's, you know, obviously folks would, I think, be able to walk from one of the cul-de-sacs to the other, but am I accurate in that, Ms. Merriman, and
Yes.
my understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so at least in terms of access, hopefully, did that answer that question, Mr. Fryer, in terms of what we're talking about?
Are we using it, Brookside? So we are using Brookside.
There would be, that would be how a certain number of the lots receive access ultimately.
And Dale Road, okay. Because my question to ask you now, sir, is that only because of the public Tumwater, what do you call it, Public Works, that I've been speaking with for the last couple of weeks in reference to the lighting after dark on what's that major road?
Crosby.
No, not
Crosby.
Crosby, the one inside. Woodland. On Woodland, I have spoken to the gentleman named Mr. Bernard in Tumwater Public Works, and they're looking at trying to get some more lighting there, because if they were planning on working after dark, or even when, spring forward, fall back, it's gonna get darker sooner. And if we don't get any lighting up in that neighborhood, where we live in, it's gonna be really, really bad for anybody to be driving up and down Brookside and that other road, Dell Road.
Sure, and
Yeah, it's
so I
bad.
understand, and I appreciate folks helping, but we're gonna try to little less if possible, but I appreciate it. But the concern, just so I understand your concern, Ms. Fryer, is the concern that additional street lighting in your mind would be appropriate or should be required potentially as part of an impact that should be addressed through this development, or is it construction specific?
No impact to this development, sir.
So the idea being, if we're adding more homes, right, in your mind, it would be appropriate for additional street lighting in the vicinity. You know, the roads that lead to this proposed plat should have some kind of street lighting, either added or at least money contributed by the property owner to improving those streets with additional lighting for safety purposes. Am I grasping
No,
it?
I don't want him to pay for it. I want Public Works to pay for it. We just need more
Okay.
lighting. Yeah,
Got it.
but either way, whether it goes approved or not,
Got it.
it's bad up in that area. That's what
Got
I was
it.
trying to address, sir.
I think I get it. So the concern is, and how this project plays in is it would be adding more, you know, homes, but the idea being, you know, additional lighting for the streets seems appropriate, whomever pays for it, whether
There you
it's,
go. Yes, sir.
you know, the city or through, you know, fees developers pay, et cetera. I don't think you want to
Right.
pay for it, right?
Oh, no, I had him cut off a light on Crosby just the last week because it was on for 24 hours a day, and it's been 9 months. So
Got it. Okay.
I don't want to pay for it. I mean, you know, somebody's paying for it, and that's not
There
good.
you go.
So anyway, but thank you,
I
sir.
got it. I
I'm
think
done.
I understand your concerns. So essentially, you would like a little more information on the sort of survey or the blasting, how that would work,
Oh, yeah.
ensuring
sir.
other property owners aren't going to have to contribute money, but what the process is in terms of how that would
Right.
work. Then any information about lighting specifically for the streets to the north.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Does that cover it?
All right. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fryer.
Thank you. Mhm.
Okay, next on our list.
Rod Finkel.
Oh, yes, sir. Oh, my goodness. I know you've been sitting too long. Almost all my feet went to sleep. Oh, my goodness.
And folks in the room, by the way, if you need to stand up or leave and use facilities, feel free to. Just be very quiet, but I won't be offended. So just want to be clear about that. So with that, Mr. Finkel, do you swear or affirm to tell truth in testimony you give here today?
I swear.
Thank you. And if you could just state
My
and
name
spell.
is Rod Finkel. It's RODNEY FINKLE. I
Great,
live
thank
at
you.
3216 Crosby Boulevard, Tumwater, Washington. My wife and I live on lot 59 of Somerset Hill 2B subdivision. So we are adjacent to the eastern border of Mr. Kim's property.
Sure, and I believe you did participate last time, correct? If I remember right.
Pardon me?
I believe you participated in the earlier hearing in 2019. I know Mr. Fryer did
Yeah.
too. So I'm familiar with you, but I certainly want to hear any concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. In the interest of making sure I had enough information submitted, I emailed one and I also put one in the mail. So you probably got 2 copies. You can throw one away. I want to go back to the original issue that we kind of came here for when we got the notice of the development of 36 properties. I was concerned why the city had acquiesced from the 31 that they had calculated in denial of the original 2019 plat. And is it my understanding that the minimum usable open space area still stands at 10%, yet for somehow they included vertical or steep slopes as part of the calculation, and they put that back in the buildable calculation in order to come up with 36 lots?
Well, and just to sort of clarify process, Mr. Finkel, I, the hearing examiner, denied the 2019 proposal, and my decision is part of the record. And that decision did say that the calculations would be different if clustering subdivision provisions had been, used. The earlier proposal did not seek to have this use the clustering subdivision portion of the municipal code. And so this newer proposal does do that. And that's the difference in terms of where that came from. But just to be clear, it's not the city that denied anything. It was me. And I'm the one that will have to decide one way or the other. So the recommendation that has been made this time is different. Staff has now come to the conclusion or the determination they believe with clustering, this proposal could meet the requirements of the municipal code. And then if you were listening at the very beginning, a couple hours ago, I did try to walk through the math, and I know it gets confusing, but essentially the way the math was calculated this time accounted for clustering, but essentially the number of 36, where that came from is you take out right of way, i.e. roads, you take out critical areas, you do the math, you multiply it essentially 8 times about 4, that gets you to about 31 or 32. But then because of clustering provisions, there's a bonus, as it were, is a density bonus that allows for 125% of the what normally would be allowed. And so that additional bonus is where that 36 came from. And when you don't you just do take the 31 times the bonus is where that number came from. And I need to look at the code myself even more thoroughly and make sure I agree with how staff did this. I haven't fully thought through that issue, but I just want to make sure it's clear kind of what how this is different than last time. And that's where that came from. So hopefully that makes sense.
Well, that was the first thing that jumped out at me when I reviewed the letter. The other thing basically relates to construction activities, and once this plat, if it's approved, and the 36 lots are going to be constructed, we're looking at a very comprehensive long-term construction activity with 36 homes going in and access roads and utilities going in, where you have to dig utility trenches. There will be blasting. Our house sits on solid rock. My neighbor's house, Norma Green, sits on solid rock. Our little private road sits on solid rock. So we know there's going to be those issues there, and we would like to have a very comprehensive plan review of the homes, at least in those approximate vicinities, to come in, survey the homes, look for sheetrock issues, foundation cracks, whatever else might be there, and then have a report on record, and then a final report once blasting is done, and if it's far enough away from our homes where it doesn't affect us, but could affect some other people. So anyway, that's one of my other concerns. And as I mentioned, it's a long-term project. It would be nice to know what the schedule's gonna be, what the critical path's gonna be, what the sequencing's gonna be. We would like to have representation through the city as an advisory committee to help review plans and specifications in the event that they could affect us. I'm
Meaning-
talking about retaining walls, drainage, and any other items that may come up, because as a retired transportation engineer, I've dealt with many, many projects where once underway, they can run a little bit ragged and haphazard and get out of control. And there has to be some way of positive specification, reinforcement, so that the homeowners are taken care of. We have a place to address issues without being put off.
Okay.
And
And
the rest of my letter virtually summarizes all the construction things I'm talking about.
Sure, but just to be clear on just to be clear on a couple things. So first off, the blasting, I'm gonna try to have staff give a little more thorough explanation of what their thought is there. And Mr. Fryer already spoke to that, so we'll try to get that info. It sounded to me, Mr. Finkel, like you actually had two issues there at the end. One would be you would like either a construction plan that is clearly delineated so that everyone kind of knows, like where do the trucks come? What are the access? What are the hours? How does this work? That'd be one aspect, but then it sounded like a second aspect was a request for a committee or something, some involvement in terms of ongoing oversight or review, or the potential for that by neighboring property owners in terms of site development as opposed to construction. In my mind, those are almost two different things, but am I misunderstanding what your thought was there?
No, I think you're on the right track there. I think it would be an advisory group that could work with the city, because the city is going to be reviewing the contractor's plans. And for compliance with roadway widths, with drainage installation, with excavations, with dust control, with traffic control, with construction, where are they gonna stage all their equipment? I mean, there's a whole litany of things that have to go on. And I feel like this development is in the middle of a bunch of people. And when it starts to happen, if there isn't some mechanism for us to have some input without, at the 11th hour, then things could happen that could affect us. So that's my concern. And I know it can be done, but I'd rather be ahead of the game than behind the game, because nobody wants the lawsuit. Nobody wants any other legal action to have to take place.
Understood. Great. Did that conclude? And I know you have written comments, and I will make sure I further review them, but they have been included in the record as well.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Beaver. Next name on the list, and thank you for folks remotely. We'll get to you shortly, I promise.
Dean Finkel.
I think our last witness, but I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
Yes.
And if you could state and spell your name.
Christine Finkel, CHRISTINE, FINKLE.
Sure. And like our last witness, you spoke last time, I believe, but anything further you wanted to provide or state, go right ahead.
I just am concerned about, if it is approved, We do live on a private road, and all the houses with abut to Mr. Kim's property. And once trees are taken down and the barriers that people put up for construction are those plastic things, we have torrential rains. The concern is the water runoff that goes directly down, basically into our house and our garage, and then the road curves. That's one concern. I don't know how that would be remediated or guaranteed that we wouldn't have runoff in our property from the construction. And the other thing is a broader concern about the community and the area. We live right on Crosby Boulevard, and right now the traffic and the congestion has, because of the apartments down the road that have just been built, has doubled and tripled, and speeds are out of control. And once this neighborhood goes in, for people to access Crosby, they're going to have to go down Brookside, Delrose, or around Sapp Avenue, and that's going to be more congestion. There's only one crosswalk on Crosby Boulevard, and we have families moving in, people walking their dogs. So this development, if it's approved, is going to impact not just the neighboring, but the community and the traffic and people trying to access, taking walks, going up to the new park that they developed. So concern about increased traffic and speeds and safety.
Great. So stormwater concerns similar to Mr. Rice kind of spoke to, but also more specifically even during construction and potentially afterward. But the idea being, if you remove certain features like trees and other things, is this going to have ultimately exacerbate problems or cause stormwater to detrimentally impact your property? That was one. And then second was congestion in and around the area, including Crosby, but also safety, and in particular, the idea, and Mr. Fryer spoke to this to some extent, but safety in terms of Crosby in particular. There's only one crosswalk, and you know, ensuring that, you know, there's safe access, walking paths for, and one of the criteria, and I will have Ms. Marion speak to this, but you know, one of the requirements I need to look at as the hearing examiner under state law is to ensure that there's, you know, safe walking routes for children to schools and school bus stops, but bigger picture also ensure that there's, you know, safe, you know, walking, you know, ensure the safety of the community and pedestrians and bicyclists. All of that is something that I do very much take into consideration. So I think I understand the concept, and I've taken notes on it, and we'll try to get whatever information we can. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Rice. Or Finkel, sorry. Sorry, that was not Ms. Rice. That was Ms. Finkel. I apologize. I'm not trying to cause any marital discord in the room there. Any further folks there in the room?
Yes, Norma Green.
Okay. Hi, thank you for being here.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could state and spell your name for me, please.
My name is Norma, N-O-R-M-A, Green, G-R-E-E-N.
Thank you, Norma Green. Thank you for being here. Go right ahead.
Yeah. I'm in lot 60, and I am next across our private driveway from the Finkels. And our property line, I've submitted an email this morning, so you have all my concerns there. But I would like to reiterate that there is a private driveway. It does go down a slope, and there is water running down it now. And so I think what Mrs. Finkel said is very important.
Okay.
I also want to point out, and if we could have the map back up there, I would really appreciate it.
Certainly. Hold on one sec. We'll have Tammy Merriman, who is doing a great job on tech, by the way. I will say, I hold these hearings in 40 or 50 cities and counties, and sometimes the tech does not work very well, but I think today we're doing a great job. So there's the map. Can you see it okay where you are?
I am on lot 60, which is that one. You're right there. let's see.
Yeah.
Over one. There,
Okay.
right where the hand is. Okay.
Northeast, you're at the northeast corner of what would be proposed here.
Northeast
Is that
corner.
right?
And yeah, and Finkel's is the one next to it. There are 5 lots up there served by a private driveway. That's number one. And we have concerns that the private driveway might be used by people who are working on the construction crews. They'll think they can drive up there and park their car, and that's not legal.
Okay,
They can't even walk up there. We don't want that kind of intrusion on our neighborhood. The other part is that our lot lines adjacent to Mr. Kim's, that is just like the other side where the gentleman asked about Road A. Is that road line right exactly on the property line?
Yeah.
And if it is up there at the top, it's on my property. Because my property goes it's a diagonal line from the corner, from the northwest corner of my property to the southwest corner of my property. It's a diagonal line from about 2 feet up an 8-foot hill of soft dirt with the salt under it, down to the other end of my property, the southwest corner, is about 6 feet up that hill of dirt and the salt. How
But-
in the world is there going to be a road put there without intruding on my property and also causing more slough off of dirt unless there's a rock wall built?
okay. And just to clarify something, Ms. Green, when you're talking about the private road that serves your property, the Finkel property, is that a private road off Woodland Drive? Probably to the east?
No.
Or-
It's off Crosby. It's off Crosby. It's
Okay, hold on. Well, I want to make sure I understand.
I'm waiting.
Thank you.
You need to be down.
All right, we're pulling.
See, that's it right there.
We're getting there. Give me
See
one
the property
second.
line?
Now I see. Okay. So I understand now. Thank you. And so what you're saying is, your concern is, that private road should not in any way, shape, or form be used or allowed to be used for purposes of constructing this plat. That's part of it, right?
Yes.
Okay, that I understand. And then I further understand the idea that, Ms. Merriman, can you pull back just the tiniest bit? Yep, give that a sec. Okay, so my understanding is that what the access that would potentially impact you all, you and the Finkels, and I think Mr. Fryer, is proposed off Woodland Road. So theoretically, one would come from Crosby, and then I'd go west on Brookside and then south on Woodland, and that would then bring me into, we'll call it the northern cul-de-sac. But there are a couple lots that have been proposed in that call it the northeast corner. And so your concern is that that access road for those couple lots over there, your concern is that could have detrimental impacts on your property and the road for one, right? And how on earth would that work is what you, I believe, testified to, correct?
Okay. You see on the west side of that private driveway, you see that little slice of pie there that's
Sure.
triangular?
Yeah.
You see that that's being cut off by the property line? That's a mutual property line. I don't know how there can be a road put there without leveling it with the driveway, and that's cutting into a bank that's part of my property.
Got it. No, I believe
Because
I understand the concern.
that bank, yeah, the bank's about 6 to 8 or 10 feet high, depending on where you are on that driveway. So that's a real concern, and the only way I could see it being managed would be to build a brick wall, and it's still going to have to be something that is interfering with my property line
Got it.
easily. So I don't like that road.
Okay, I understand the concern. Let's try to get information on that.
I have a concern with what I heard tonight, and that's the size of the lots in the clustering. With 7 or 7.5 feet between the houses, how is a fire engine going to get in there? I lived in a community where it was required to have at least 10 feet between houses. So this is down to 7, and there's a curve there in that road. And I just don't, that's serving those 2 houses and the ones, you know, that are along the north end of Mr. Kim's property.
Uh-huh.
I don't see how a fire engine can do that.
Okay, so
7.5 feet. They can't even do a roundabout with going over the curb without
Okay.
going over the curb.
And we'll
So
try to
I
get.
don't think 7.5 feet is adequate.
We'll try to get information. Tammy Merriman did speak to potentially were this approved. Again, I have not made any decisions, but there might be a need for certain homes or certain lots to be served by sprinklers. And I know that the fire department was provided an opportunity and given an opportunity to comment, but I certainly understand your comments and we'll try to get any information we can.
And I don't want a fire jumping across from that forested area. I know it's not going to be as forested, but to my house,
Sure.
because our private driveway is not as wide as a regular street. It can manage only 2 cars with no cars parked on either side.
Okay. Great.
And the rest of it's in what I wrote.
Okay. Did that then
The rest
conclude?
of my concerns are in what I wrote, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Green.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. Any others?
Greg Knight. Okay, and Susie? Okay. And then John Ryan?
John Ryan. Mr. Ryan, are you an attorney? The name I'm trying to remember, and if we can bring that down for a sec, I apologize. I'm trying to remember. It vaguely rang a bell.
Yes, I am, and I was representing the HOA previously,
There.
but now I'm appearing just as an abutting property.
As the
owner.
property, you're here qua citizen, not lawyer, and I get to make a terrible joke. which is,
Absolutely.
I normally do not swear attorneys in. I sometimes swear at attorneys, at least off screen. But Mr. Ryan is not appearing as an attorney. He's appearing as a property owner. So he gets the rare moment of getting sworn in. He probably doesn't even know how this works. Mr. Ryan, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just state and spell your name for me.
Okay. John, John, Ryan, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Go right ahead.
Thank you. There's actually 3 things that I would like to address, and they are traffic, the SEPA issue, and then the clustering. If my calculations are correct, and I may want to ask a question of Ms. Merriman if that's appropriate, is it 24 or 22 houses that will exit onto Woodland Drive?
And normally I wouldn't allow but this is so straightforward. Let's get an answer.
Sure.
But just to be clear, I think it's helpful to know that. So, Ms. Merriman, you don't have to pull the map up, but are we able to quickly someone check that number for us?
20, I think it's
22.
22 is the answer. So 22 of 36 proposed. So 22 would be off of Woodland. Is that right? The northern, what I call the northern part of this. I'm getting a nod. Okay, so 22 to the north, and then theoretically 14 to the south. Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
So, thank you. Roughly 2/3, maybe just under, are going to exit onto Woodland. And the only improvements being proposed for roadways are SAP, which has much less traffic going onto it. Our concern originally was that people would use it as a thoroughfare. That was one of the issues. That's been eliminated. Happy to hear it. The only problem is that now probably a larger percentage of the traffic is going to go onto Woodland because they will have no other alternative. The problem with putting them onto Woodland, number one, is that intersection has a stop sign running up the hill from Crosby, and there's no other traffic control at that intersection. Furthermore, further down, if people went to exit the other Delrose,
Oh.
the roadway, the roadbed, sorry, I was waiting for the crowd to finish. The Delrose Woodland, as it gets down to Delrose, is a substandard roadway. There's a depression in the roadway from a sunken drain pipe of some kind, sewer pipe possibly, and the roadbed is all from about, I'd say, 3 houses in from Delrose to almost up to my home. The roadbed is what in the paving industry, when I used to work in paving, was alligatored, I think is the term that they used. It is broken up into pieces no bigger than 2 to 3 or 4 inches square.
And
the entire roadbed.
so to be clear on the concern that you're raising right now, Mr. Ryan, is that, and I hate to keep doing this to Ms. Merriman, but she's a great sport. The idea being, if folks, 2/3 of traffic is proposed to leave and exit, enter and exit this plat from the north. And yes, there's, several ways cars can go, but the idea being that if we pull the map up one more time, sorry, Ms. Merriman, you're a great sport. If folks come from Woodland, or, Crosby, my understanding, I believe, right, is that, there you go, perfect. Not so much Brookside, or maybe if I misunderstood, I apologize, but my understanding, your concern is if folks are coming actually, let's say, from the north, then they would turn then right on Delrose and then a left turn on Woodland to come down. There's alligatoring and substandard road issues, traffic signal issues, meaning there's no major traffic control features at that Delrose, Crosby, all the way to the north. Am I grasping the concern? One, start there.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Ryan, that was you can object, but how terrible my question was. But I think what I'm making sure is I understood that first idea. That's a concern, correct?
Yes.
And then second, you made the point that in this case, improvements, off-site improvements are proposed for SAP, but in fact, SAP Road is only receiving 1/3 of the traffic. And I'm guessing you're of the opinion that there ought to be perhaps improvements on Woodland and in the area. Perhaps, I don't know, lighting, like one of your colleagues in the room there proposed, Mr. Fryer, but you think it could be or ought to be appropriate to require some offsite improvements, and I'm use a lawyer term for you. In your mind, there's a nexus that would require or ought to require some improvements on Woodland in the north, in addition to any kind of fees. Am I grasping your argument there?
Yes, and if it's not going to be imposed on the developer, then certainly it needs to be addressed by the city in how this development is going to impact that traffic flow. I made objections in my previous comments about the traffic study, and if we were to pull that map up to show all of the developments, I know Ms. Merriman said it was all factored in, but I find that really hard to believe that all of the apartments, including current construction, under construction, which are up on the hill by the school, all of that construction has added dramatic traffic to this neighborhood. So much so that the city has put in 2 roundabouts. I understand that they're designed to help traffic flow, but they didn't do that because there wasn't there wasn't traffic on those roads. They did it because the traffic is so, the volumes have increased so dramatically because of those new developments. The size of the apartment building just north of our neighborhood, the Somerset Hills, is a very significant multifamily apartment complex. And it opens directly onto the roundabout.
Sure.
And so the traffic volumes there, I find hard to imagine. I looked at the traffic trip calculations and 9.57 per day per house and all of that. I understand that's those numbers, but the only thing I could find in Tumwater's calculations for intersections around our neighborhood were from 2015. That's the most up-to-date thing that was on the internet. Now, maybe I wasn't looking in the right place. I'll grant that that's a possibility, but it was still 2015 where they were calculating trips on the two intersections near our neighborhood.
Got it. So just make sure I understand, Ms. Ryan. So the idea being, while it's not difficult to calculate, the amount of potential trips related to this development, your concern is that the traffic impact analysis that previously occurred that is being reused did not, in fact, include or calculate or envision what we call pipeline projects, right? And meaning that had it already accounted for impacts from that big apartment, multi-family apartment complex and other projects. And your concern is that perhaps it did not, or it did not, the previous traffic analysis or concurrency analysis did not adequately address or think through adding this on top of all the rest in terms of level of service and other impacts to neighborhood intersections in and around the area. Is that kind of an accurate understanding?
That's a great summary.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And then SEPA. I was tracking with you on the SEPA adoption and using incorporating the SEPA DNS and the SEPA documents by reference. The problem I have with that analysis, however, is the stormwater plan is a completely new plan. That is an environmental impact plan. It impacts stormwater runoff, the Percival Creek watershed, and how that is seen by a city as not being a significant change, when in fact it's a brand new plan for this part of the proposal, seems incongruous to me. And I think that needs to be at least looked at in your analysis. And I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but it certainly seems that is a new part and a significant new part of the environmental conditions on that property and how they were now analyzed.
Well, and to that end, Mr. Ryan, I got to ask, the city has thorough critical areas ordinances, right? And these types of things do get addressed with assessing critical areas, the municipal code. But is your concern that the stormwater, because it's new, or the concept of how it'll be addressed is new, that ought to have been considered such that a new SEPA determination should have been made? And I ultimately usually am not the one that assesses that, to the extent that unless someone appeals it, and also unless we're in a jurisdiction where that appeal goes to me, which is very few cases, but sometimes it's the case. And I'll be honest, I don't recall. I believe in Tumwater, there is the possibility of an admin appeal to me that would then be consolidated with this hearing. I think that is how it works in Tumwater. But your argument is that you think potentially there should have been a new SEPA determination because of the stormwater. Am I getting that right?
Well, especially if it forecloses any ability to have it reviewed or an appeal by affected parties.
See,
That I
meaning-
think is SEPA appeal, yes.
Sure. I just want to be clear because, you know, it's been said recently by the courts and others, right, that SEPA's kind of become a procedural step, but in fact, the way to, you know, back when SEPA first was passed, you probably know some of this history. There weren't critical areas codes. You know, it was the Wild West, and SEPA was a way to ensure that someone thought about that. But now cities like Tumwater and others have developed very thorough critical areas ordinances. And so when I talk about, you know, folks don't maybe always know this, but there is an environmental review. I do look at the critical areas ordinances and ensure, you know, that's part of it. That's independent of the bigger picture SEPA, you know, but just want to be clear on kind of what we're talking about, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So if you can just maybe re-summarize your concern over SEPA, that would be helpful for me.
Well, that the city, in my estimation, made the wrong conclusion in determining that this was so similar, almost identical, if I'm not, I'm taking the words from Mr. Matlock. I believe that's, I'm paraphrasing, that they were so similar that they were almost identical. And so they said, well, we're just going to adopt it. We're just going to adopt it by reference and conclude, sort of like they did with the traffic, that it's sort of like a concurrency for the environmental.
Got it. I think I understand the concern. So the argument, if you were in a lawyer role, you would be arguing that this procedurally there was a concern over how that went, and you know, the question of whether I could deal with that at this point, I don't know the answer. I hadn't thought that through, but I certainly, you tracked and I had concerns that I wanted to ask, and the record is what it is, but I don't know if maybe you have an answer for me. I don't know what your background is law-wise, but
well, we time barred.
I don't know if I have an opportunity to even address that problem at this moment, but
Understood.
if you have a thought on it, please share it if you like.
No, I'm probably further into the weeds on this than I had intended anyway, but it was just something I was thinking about as we were sitting back there listening to the discussion about SEPA. So,
Understood.
so I'll wrap up my comments with just more of a comment on clustering and the use of clustering. It seems, again, incongruous to me that you can have higher density and greater preservation of open space and protection of critical areas and habitat. I find that hard to believe that those work in concert, but that seems to be exactly what Ms. Merriman said, if I'm not mistaken. And so the idea that we've got higher density here and better care of the environment when you have smaller lot sizes, houses closer together, and you're having open space that is passive open space that's being counted to increase densities. It just seems, if not for this project, then certainly this ought to be looked at again because it does not seem to be a way to do developments as a long-term preservation of environmental resources. So that's more of a comment than that on this project and the cities, how they're approaching this rather than Mr. Kim's project.
I fully understand the comment, and I think it's applicable statewide, but the concept being, I think what you're trying to say is, you know, while it might be good to have fewer homes, or sorry, have smaller lots and protect more area, why do you then get to have more homes on smaller lots? The idea being, it seems weird that that's somehow it's better to have more homes on smaller lots as opposed to the same number on smaller lots with more protected area. Am I grasping the idea?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So the idea is if 30 is the number, it should be 30 on smaller lots and protect a bigger area for clustering, but it shouldn't be 36 and protect. I think I get there's a lot of fight in the
And I understand the
legislature over
developer-
this, but I think I understand the concept.
Yeah. So I'm not going to take up any more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. And well behaved, by the way, for an attorney. I need to point that out. I truly appreciate it.
I tried.
Do we have others in the room?
Bernetta Johnson. Okay, and Janine.
I think someone's coming up. Okay. And hi, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could state and spell your name for me.
My name is Janine Beaudry, JANINEBEAUDRY.
And I believe you've submitted comments, written comments, is that right?
Yes, last time and this time as well.
I recognize the name Beaudry. Yeah, it's got a nice ring to it. So I recognize the name. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, I'm not going to go over all the things I put in my public comments, but just a couple of concerns that, kind of come up while we're sitting here. And one of them is looking at this map that we're looking at right now. I live on Brookside, on the south side of Brookside, so right abutting the north side of this property. Our houses are all in the very backs of the lot. So you can see I'm basically right in the middle of the block, and you can see the roof line. I'm right up against the back of the property, and they're going to put a driveway literally on the property line right there, and then there's going to be a house right there with, very little setbacks between them, and any ability to get fire trucks or anything in there. Even if they put, sprinklers in some of the homes, and we don't know which homes that might happen, we don't have sprinklers, and we're going to be smacked right up against them too. It's a concern. And then I've heard, about fire trucks getting in there, but, how do garbage trucks get in there? How do other things access some of these driveways that are just not accessible? And how can that possibly impact our properties if there's not enough room for vehicles to really maneuver in that amount of space? And then my other concern was, yes, we're reusing the traffic study that was done before 2019, I think. But what isn't being considered, even if they consider the developments, is what has changed since then. There's been a census in 2020, and the cost of housing has increased enormously. And because of that, we now have, it's not 2.6 people per household anymore. We have numerous houses in our neighborhood that have like 6 or 7 vehicles because people can't afford houses anymore. They're all sharing houses. There's more rentals because of that. And there is a lot more traffic impact. So I just feel like in order to really do justice and figure out the true impact, there needs to be an updated study.
Okay.
And where the trail is, it comes out where Crosby Court is way down the road. And, I have a child that goes to the elementary school. So we have a lot of families in the neighborhood. There's no crosswalk on Brookside. There's inadequate lighting all the way through the neighborhood. But we're supposed to, we don't have enough bus drivers, at least a couple times a week. It seems like we're getting calls that, that we've got to go pick up our kids or they have to walk home because there is no bus or the bus will be an hour late. But they don't have a safe way to get across Crosby. So, and then you add all the extra traffic coming in, that's pretty scary for a parent. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
That is everyone in the room that signed up. Is there anyone else who did not sign who wanted to speak? No? Okay, So that's everybody in here,
Yeah.
and then we do have people
Yep.
online.
And yeah, so I'll start with Kathy and Dave Phillips. I appreciate your patience. I know that whoever is there raised their hand quite a while ago, and thank you for being patient. So if we can unmute them, then they'll have to hit the unmute button themselves.
I did.
Hi, there you go. And I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great, thank you. And if you could just state and spell your name for me.
Kathy, Kathy, Phillips, Phillips.
Thank you, Kathy Phillips. I appreciate your patience. Here's your opportunity.
I sent a letter. My main question was just or request was to have a seismic study done on the foundation of our home before and after any blasting. Also, I am really concerned about traffic in this area. The traffic on Crosby it's not so much that it's dense, but people just travel that road, that hill so fast that even when I cross in the marked crosswalks with my dogs, people are laying on their horn. They're going 30 miles over the speed limit. And I'm just thinking we're going to increase we're going to increase the traffic in this area. And and the privacy would be changed too. So those are my main concerns. And I oppose the development because I just think that we have had enough development in this area and we have a lot of ongoing across the hill. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, the next person who has their hand up that I see is Carrie Wayno.
Hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do. Thank you.
Thanks. And if you could just spell your name for the audio recording.
Sure. It's Carrie, Carrie, Wayno, Wayno.
Great. Thank you for being here. Go right ahead.
So, I mean, I'm not going to repeat everybody else's concerns. I echo them. I wanted to just add, my family lives a block away from the area, the land in question. And I don't know if anyone who's actually going to make a decision on this has actually been to this area. So I thought I'd just describe it for you from our eyes. It is just just going past Woodland. Along Crosby in Tumwater is the area. We've been talking about that. Adjacent to a neighborhood that has many homes with small children. Mine is one of them. They're 7 years old. We call it the Forbidden Forest. That's what our kids call it. As you enter the area from Woodlawn, it smells fresh and clean. There's a green canopy of large fir trees overhead, which are homes to owls, a few of which we've seen, and that you can hear, as well as other birds and squirrels. As you walk into the forest, the land dips down past more trees, downed logs, and heavy vegetation. There are a couple faint trails that people and animals have made over time. Along the trails in the fall, winter, and spring following sustained rains, as you've heard about today, which we get a lot of, a stream forms along the trail and sort of heads down the land. It's somewhat steep along the trail. It's especially steep as you look up to the side to the homes that are along the private driveway. It's just really kind of all of the colors of green are in that space. When the trails dry up, you can walk down to more greenery and vegetation at the bottom. When they're wet, it's a full stream. So my kiddo is 7 and tonight drew a picture that showed on the one side, animals and in their homes of trees. And then on the other side, basically wrote no homes for animals, and that the animals were sad because they didn't have homes. So we just wanted to give a view of what our Forbidden Forest looks like when you're making your decision. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, Ms. Wayno, real quick. When you're talking about the Forbidden Forest, you mean this exact property, not the area at large.
Correct. This exact property.
There you go. And
right.
I do note that while I don't often do a actual site view in conjunction with development. I don't, or if I do, I don't talk about it on the record. I will say I am familiar with this part of the city, and in 2019, prior to my hearing, I knew how much interest there was, and I did, go through the area and make sure I kind of understood, the geography and everything. So I put that out. I'm not unfamiliar. I'm not that Seattle attorney that doesn't know what's going on. Except that I'm just up the road in Tacoma, but I am also quite familiar. And in pre-pandemic, I did used to come down to City Hall, and I kind of missed doing that. But I am familiar with the area. But I appreciate your comments, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next name that I see is a Bridget Underdahl.
Good evening.
Hi, and I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
If you could spell your name for me.
It's Bridget Underdahl, BridgetUnderdahl.
Great, and I didn't even butcher the pronunciation, hopefully. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
And I'm going to reiterate a lot of points that were made, but I'd like to testify in opposition. I think the biggest point that I'd like to share is the need to humanize the living experiences and well-being of people's lives, homes, and health of the land. I'm deeply concerned about overpopulation, the additional stress, noise, increased traffic, lack of green spaces, lack of privacy, the loss of the trees and wildlife on especially land that was not initially designed for this. I'm concerned of the lack of adequate runoff reservoirs, erosion, and more. I'm deeply opposed to this due to these concerns and more, but again, mostly for the humanity and continued well-being of those who currently live here and call this home, as many share these concerns about the negative impacts to our community. With so many and so much community opposition, I see a real issue in moving forward with this project. Thank you for the ability to share that.
Great. And I don't recall, sorry, had you submitted written comments in advance?
I don't believe I did, or if I did, it was attached to my Zoom meeting link.
Well, it sounded like you may have been reading something there, or you're just better spoken than me. But if I was going to say, if you'd like to include what you just read, if you did read something as part of the record, I'd be happy to do so. But I didn't recall that you had submitted written comments. Any thought there?
Oh, okay. How do I include that?
So Tammy Merriman at the end here, I'll make sure, or maybe she can write it in. Well, we'll make sure it's clear, but Tammy, can you tell folks the best way to contact the city?
Yes, the best way to provide comments for this would be to email me, tmerriman@ci.tumwater.wa.us. The email address is on the public hearing notice. If you go on the website, you can open it and it should link. So there's lots of, or even on our city website and the community development site, you can link directly to my name.
Okay.
And just to be clear what I was saying there, I'm not asking that everyone resubmit things. I sounded like Ms. Underdahl was reading something that was very articulate, and I just thought it'd be helpful to include it in the record. Because as I noted at the outset, that having the written version of things can be helpful for the record. So totally up to you, but if you do send that along, we'll make sure that it does get lumped in with the public comment exhibits.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then the next name I see is Angela Garner.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, and I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could spell your name for me.
It's Angela, Angela. Last name is Garner, Garner.
Great, thank you. Go right ahead.
So I really just have two comments. The first is regarding the SEPA. My recommendation or what I propose is 5 years is a long length of time to be able to just default and use a document from 5 years ago. So that's my first concern. And I think in this way, I align with Mr. Ryan that I think that should be relooked at. Secondly, and I think most importantly, and I second the last two individuals who spoke, is I'm concerned about the ecosystem of our community. Not only for the people, but the animals that live in that area, the displacement of them, the trees, the things that make our community a community. So that's my biggest concern, and really just wanted to get that out there, that's a huge impact and a huge dissatisfier to those of us that live here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, any others there on the virtual side? Again, the raise hand feature in the bottom there is the best way to indicate you'd be interested in testifying. Give that a sec. And I just want to point out for folks in the room, physically in the room there, if you need to go, again, as long as you're quiet, I won't be offended. I know it's quite late. I do plan on having Mr. Kim speak and then staff speak afterward. But for folks, I just want to be clear, you will not offend me if you have to go. And I'll have if you provided your information, you'll receive a copy of my decision when it is ready. I just wanted to take a sec to point that out. Okay, I'm not seeing any other folks on the attendees virtual side that are using the raise hand feature indicating an interest in testifying. So my intent at this point then is to turn back to Mr. Kim, our applicant, and give him an opportunity to respond to what he's heard from members of the public. And then after that, we'll go back to city staff. So Mr. Kim, thank you. You're sworn in earlier, but thank you for being here. I'll give you a chance now to respond to any thoughts you may have. And then I also, well, let me start there. But I will say, I know it's been a long hearing. I would be willing to give you an opportunity to write something in the next few days if you'd like to do that as well. But for now, if you wanted to respond to any specific questions, comments, ideas, start there if you could.
Okay. A person named Darlene Rice mentioned about the problem with the stormwater coming to her property. And I believe that okay, her property is at the downstream from this property, so it's natural that when rain comes, water flow downward, and apparently water from hillside is going to her backyard. And fortunately, the way the street is laid out, the street will be constructed just behind the home, and the elevation of the street will be oriented in such a way that the high point of the street will be at the west side, that is near her home, and low point will be on the east side. So all the water coming from the hillside will be collected by the street and go toward the east side, and will be collected into stormwater drain area to be constructed. So actually, development of this property will help to divert all the water coming to her property into the stormwater. So I believe that it will help the programs she's facing at this time.
Sure. So on that point, your idea was that essentially, yes, gravity is what it is. Water flows downhill. But in this case, in light of infrastructure proposed, you believe that the stormwater infrastructure, I think particularly in this case, we're talking about Road A, but the infrastructure would be built in a way that could theoretically actually reduce or improve,
Eliminate.
make better the
Or-
situation
yeah.
for property owners to the west. Is that your contention?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Well, many people made a comment that opposing development, and I believe that all those people are very, very selfish opposing development, because if their way, if things go the way they want, there won't be any development, and they will be forced to live, long distance away from where they may be working. Okay, so
Right.
we will, we'll have to somehow accommodate each other so we can live together
Okay.
and help each other. Okay, that's my comment.
Does that conclude your thoughts and comments then, Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Okay. So then with that, I'm gonna turn then to Tammy Merriman and try to get some more specific information in relation to what we heard. So Tammy Merriman in particular, maybe I'll run through a couple things here. And I want to stress for folks in the room there that ultimately the burden of proof or burden of persuasion, as we say in the law, is not on Tammy Merriman and city staff. The burden is on the applicant. Just want to be clear about that. But Tammy Merriman does have a wide breadth of knowledge on these subjects, and hopefully can give us some additional information. So I don't know if you have your list or you want me to go down my list, however you would like to do this.
I tried to write down the questions that I thought that I was supposed to be responding to.
I'll let you do your list, and if I have additional questions, I'll
Okay.
ask. And if I missed anything, folks, I apologize. But we'll move forward as best we can.
Okay, so for Mr. Rice, what I had is that he has his written comments. His main concern was stormwater and the runoff from the hill, and the seasonal stream that comes down onto his site. So I think in his location, the road is adjacent to his property, and that the stormwater facilities that are set up for the subdivision will direct the water away. Hopefully that will take care of that runoff that he is talking about. I'm sure that if needed, we can go further into the stormwater report, but I believe that the stormwater plan and the road and the way the runoff will be directed should probably take care of the issue.
And let me break in real quick on that idea, being that he had a couple more, I guess, more specific ideas or thoughts or questions. One was, has there been an actual sort of hydrological assessment? And I guess my question is, there is that preliminary stormwater site plan that is exhibit, I think, 17 from February 15, 2023. And when I say, when we talk about a stormwater site plan, I'm not saying a drawing all on its own. I mean, this is a multi-page document, if I understand, right, that has actual hydrological calculations, et cetera, in case Mr. Finkel or others wanted to review it. It's publicly available. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, and my apologies. I drew a line, and I was thinking the next section of my comments were somebody else, but it is his. The geological study and the stormwater plan Both have been submitted. The stormwater report does have existing situation, what is existing on the site, and talks, and they did actual markings out there and to try to find where the existing water is located on the site. So yes, the stormwater site plan is a full stormwater report. The preliminary report showed that the stormwater runoff would be directed to the storm ponds on the site.
Okay, so sorry, and I think it was Mr. Rice who talked about it, but again, but the idea is it's not just someone drew things on a map. It's we have a full preliminary stormwater report that does assess, does an assessment from an engineering standpoint, and I would encourage anyone to read it. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but I assume this ran through the, the details on, you pretend that nothing exists on site and it's a forested condition, and then you run through the calculations, and then you do calculations after development. And as a lawyer, I over the last decade, I've come to get better at understanding these, but I do certainly rely on the expertise of engineers. But the idea is folks smarter than me have reviewed this in terms of engineering, and that's what this is. We have a full stormwater preliminary report that I believe AP Consulting Engineers has prepared, and that's Exhibit 17.
Yes.
And then the other thing that was specific was, are there actual infrastructure like stormwater ponds or anything to that effect? I think you just spoke to the fact that there are a few of those features potentially being put in place, correct?
That's correct. The last thing that I have for Mr. Rice was a rear property setback and a setback and adjacent to the street. And property setbacks are for building foundations to a property line. There is not a property line setback for a public street. So this public street, and you alluded to this, Mr. Reeves, is that the right of way at 47 feet is not 47 feet of pavement. There's 2 drive lanes, and then there's shoulders and sidewalks. And so it's not necessarily that the road will be right there. There will be a little bit of right of way between the street and his property, but setbacks are from building foundation to property line.
Okay, and can you pull the site plan up one more time for the 8,000th time? So that comment, that concern was raised actually, in fact, by multiple folks, but in different locations. But essentially, you're saying that the municipal code requirements don't require a certain amount of space in between the property line and a road. It's that they require a setback between a building or structure or foundation and the road. Is that A.1? Am I understanding that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so and again, whether that's good or not, I mean, that's just what the municipal code said, right? But needing to think about impacts. Another witness raised this as a major concern, but in reference to the other, I'll call it the northeast side in particular there. Yep. How would that possibly get built? The need for retaining walls, potentially, etc. I guess the question is, that type of thing, has the city already seen or reviewed any kind of analysis on topographical features and how those would play into things like how that road right there would go in? And I guess that Mr. Finkel, in fact, it was Mr. Rice earlier, but our second, I think, witness was Mr. Finkel, had concerns about kind of ongoing involvement or the potential, when that review occurs, folks may want to, be aware of what's going on or have input. But can you just speak to those concepts, Ms. Merriman?
Sure. First, I'll clarify that these are driveways. They're not streets. And in fact, there's shared driveway approaches. So the 2 lots back here are served, even though these lines show these are shared driveway approaches. At this point, at preliminary, while we have some preliminary topographical information, we have contours to show where the steep slopes are. The actual construction, when we get up here for driveways and so forth, the details will be pulled out at the civil plan submission. And to know whether actual retaining walls need to be completed to hold road, if there are retaining walls, is there fencing or other type of, protection from the top of the retaining wall to whether what's above or below it. So that greater detail would come out in the site development and grading or civil plan submission.
Sure. And am I correct in thinking that, if the city's review process ultimately determines, it's just not possible to get, if we zoom in, is it 30 and 31, those two proposed lots?
32 and 33 here.
All right, yeah, okay, there we go. If the city ultimately says, there's just no way to do it, without having a detrimental or, it's just not possible, then the developer loses the potential to develop those two lots. But that's a review process, you're saying, that not what I'm looking at currently, meaning I'm looking at more of a bigger sort of higher picture, I guess, but the more detailed analysis will happen further.
Yes.
But so that was one, but two, the concept Mr. Finkel floated of, an advisory group or other members of the public in the area being able to sort of input or stay involved. Is there a mechanism for that other than the applicant agreeing to it? Is there anything in the municipal code that would allow for that, or are you aware of that being a thing that can happen? That was one thing that was floated as a concept.
Right. I am not aware of a code that says, well, I know there's not a code that says we need to do any public notice on the site development or grading. So it's not an actual requirement that we provide notice. If Mr. Examiner, you want to add a condition to the plat that when civil plans are submitted, that we notify parties of record that they're here and can review. I have seen that in my previous jurisdiction. I'm not sure about having a volunteer or committee do the review of the plans, as our engineers our city engineers are looking to make sure the plan meets city code. So as long as it meets our development regulations, our development guide, and our city codes, then we have to approve it.
Right.
Now, making situations, or if there's retaining walls or something that come up from the review and it's going to affect a property owner, or we pull it back, or they even maybe lose a lot or two, those sometimes that happens and it's just a minor change and we don't come back to the beginning and start all over. We just, as long as it's less impactful than what was there before, then we can consider that a minor change through the site development and grading review process.
Okay. And then I guess thinking through notice and those types of things, the idea of a construction activity schedule or kind of a construction plan, I don't recall honestly from the conditions if there was any specific conditions related to that. I certainly am familiar or have imposed in this jurisdiction or others, that a detailed construction schedule or plan be prepared. But do you happen to know if that was recommended here, or but the idea being that, trucks need to, be aware of certain times and where they're allowed to go, and, construction workers would not be allowed to park over there on that private road that serves the Sunset Hills division, which is Ms. Green and a few others' property immediately there off the private road. But in terms of a construction activity schedule or plan, any ideas or thoughts on that concept?
I've actually seen that those types of situations happen, especially if trucks need to go through residential subdivisions, such as the Woodland and the Brookside, sorry if I get it wrong, roads that they're notified that they only travel on certain days or certain hours. We do have work hours set, dusk to dawn or 7 to whatever that is. I'm sorry, I can't quote it off the top of my head, but there are specific hours as well. That absolutely can happen. And, the challenge here, I think, for anybody is a preliminary plat is good for 5 years. Site development and grading plans are good for 12 months. I mean, so it could be many years out before we even see this type of activity, but I do believe that that's an appropriate thing to ask.
Okay. And then, yeah, good for 5 years unless, the legislature changes it.
Yes.
There's been various times in the last couple, decade where that became 10 years, 7 years.
Yes.
But right now, currently 5 is what exists. Okay. All right. Notification for construction. Let's see. Advisory group. Maybe we can turn to the blasting and clarifying kind of what the city's thought or intent is. And I think I did not misspeak when I was talking to Mr. Fryer. Any kind of blasting review, none of this would yes, there at the developer's expense. You wanted to point that out. That was one idea, meaning neighbors are not going to have to pay for this. But the question that was raised by several is kind of maybe just walk me through what the thought is here, if you could, and what the process kind of looks like.
Well, and I'm reading this just like everybody else does because I've not actually processed one of these yet. So when we have any blasting proposed in the city, they need to apply for application. There's surety bonds in the sum of $1 million or pardon me, $100,000. That's required. It can be raised if the building official feels that is not adequate to cover. Blasting is only between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. It's in accordance with I don't even know what this. No excess of 1.2 inches per second. Anyway, and then all structures within 300 feet of the blast area will be given 2 weeks notice of any blast. And then the structure subject to pre-blast, we can do the inspection at the developer's expense. So what this does not say and what this process does not provide for is after construction inspections that others are requesting.
Okay. Has the city given any thought to that?
I am not aware of that, no.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm making a detailed note on that because I don't need to hear from members of the public on that issue to the extent that I am very confident were I to approve this, the folks that raise concern would like me to further impose a condition that would require an inspection on those properties after the fact and ensure that any detrimental impacts are then paid for by the developer. I'm confident that would be something folks would want me to include as a condition. So whether I do that or think I legally can do that, that's a whole separate issue, but I'm real confident that would be what would be being requested. So I think that takes care of blasting. The next, I have several other issues. Obviously traffic was a big one, but privacy, fire access, were big ones as well. Environmental impacts, SEPA also, but whatever order you had there, I think we're getting close to the end, but.
Okay. Fire. Now, again, these are driveway accesses. And that is why the conditions are proposed in the staff report. because some of these homes are going to need to be sprinkled because fire trucks cannot make it up into the units. Garbage and access to these will just be by the people that are living there. Just like any other driveway, they'd have to bring their garbage down to the street. Fire trucks would be here. If they can't get to it, then that's why the houses are sprinkled. Setbacks, 7.5 feet on side yard setbacks. I'll just show right here. That's the building setback to the property line. So in between two homes, it'll be 7.5 on this side and 7.5 on that side. So it's a total of 15 feet between two units. So it does meet the 10-foot fire separation between buildings. Was there something else on the site plan before we talk about SEPA? Oh, I wanted to, one more thing on the stormwater. The applicant, this site plan is so very similar to the original one, that the stormwater facilities are very similar or near the same as what they were proposed before. Because the layout has changed a little bit, because driveway locations have changed a little bit, we required that their engineers show that the stormwater, along with these changes, not only from what it was changed before, but that what they're proposing meets the 2022 manual. So that was one of the stipulations before we even got to this point in the project review, was to make sure that what they're proposing, what they proposed in 2019 also meets, the stormwater also meets the 2022 code.
Oh, okay. So, thank you. I didn't have, I think I'm good in terms of looking at the site plan there. So,
Okay.
I had did you have more on your list? I had just a few more. I was certain traffic was a big one, and then also potential impacts or required improvements or especially for the north, Woodland Drive, etc. Was one that was brought up several times.
So somebody had mentioned the offsite improvements on Sap Road. When we look at development, what they do is their frontage improvements. So they only have to do the property or the street that fronts their property, unless they have impacts further out that fails the transportation system. Only then would they have to do offsite improvements. So onsite improvements would be frontage improvements at the property here. At Woodland Drive, the frontage improvements here are complete. So his frontage improvements is continuing this street down to the cul-de-sac. I don't believe that the number of trips generated is such that it creates a need to do offsite improvements on either side of the development.
Okay, so just to clarify that point, in fact, Sap Road, the bicycle, that was the bicycle lane adding and the frontage.
Yes.
That's actually not, I wouldn't call it an off-site improvement. Technically, I guess it's right of way owned by the city, but they're making required improvements to the adjacent right of way in front of the property. That's what's proposed, correct?
Correct. Yes.
But they're not doing further improvements on SAP that are not adjacent to development. Yes.
Correct.
Okay, and so the city is saying that based on the proposed number of trips and impacts, the city doesn't believe it would be appropriate, or there's not a nexus that would require the developer to say install lighting in the neighborhood to the north, or they themselves pay for a crosswalk or something else on Crosby. They will be paying traffic impact fees where this would be approved, but it had the level of trips in the city's mind does not rise to the level of impact that the city believes they can justify requiring offsite improvements beyond paying traffic impact fees. Am I understanding the idea?
Yes, that's correct. And I'm going to butcher this, but we cannot require a developer to pay for other developments inadequacies. So if there's offsite problems with roads or something, we can't make this developer fix an existing problem. So
On private
well,
infrastructure, you mean?
right. You know, if an intersection, if there's an issue offsite where there is a degradation or something, this project it didn't cause it. We can't make him fix a problem that's already existing. We can't make a developer fix a problem that's already pre-existing. We can only make it through the nexus of the trips generated from this site.
Right. And it gets complicated. I deal with the issue frequently, but the idea being the traffic impact fees being assessed are the way in which the city tries to deal with, growth paying for growth. But then any specific offsite improvement, the only way that can be justified is if there's a explicit nexus and, there's a legal analysis there that is quite complex, but I hope I understand the problem, but that's what you were trying to speak to. Am I grasping that?
I think
now,
so,
that
yes.
said, Mr. Fryer and several others certainly have concerns of, having more cars causing more problems.
Yes.
Some of the infrastructure involved is public. I guess, do you happen to know if there's plans in the city's TIP or, transportation improvement plan or, any concept or ideas of adding say a crosswalk to Crosby, an additional one nearby, or any plans on adding additional lighting in the neighborhoods, on public right of way? Do you happen to know that?
Not off
any of
Not off the top of my head, but I could certainly inquire with our transportation engineering department.
Okay. I would find it helpful at least to know for my sake and purposes of my decision in terms of kind of having a better sense of what, long-term plans are, because this issue of, traffic and especially the issue of safe walking routes in the vicinity, was brought up many times. So if you can maybe have a very quick email or a very quick memo produced that sort of says, that'll also hopefully help folks interested in this project. And again, I have not made up my mind, but to get a better sense of, if it's not in the city's plan, independent of this project, that'll give folks an idea of how, they should talk to, staff and request further improvements, as it were, advocate for themselves outside the scope of this project. So that would be helpful, Ms. Berman.
Okay, I've got it down.
Thank you. Okay, so traffic, we talked fire service, construction, activity. There probably is more, but do you have anything on your list? I'm going to quickly go through my, and it's getting quite late, but I appreciate folks' patience. Well,
I can only say that the last thing is on the SEPA threshold. I'm looking at WAC 197.11.230.
Yep.
Number 2. No, pardon me, subsection 3. Can't get the subsections right, where it states the threshold determination is not required when there's been a previous threshold determination or a notice of adoption or an addendum is prepared. So again, I've just, in my past jurisdiction and in past reviews, if the project is the same, it's the same applicant, it's the same project, it's the same number of lots, it is essentially the same project. Like you said, our critical areas code and our development regulations are very strong. We made sure that it was in compliance with those. So again, the project was similar enough that we didn't feel that an additional review and additional determination was required.
Okay. Great. Anything else that you wanted to speak to that you had on your list there?
I have a lot of notes. I'm not sure if I've missed something. And if you think I've covered what you thought I should.
Hope we did. For folks that have been very patient, I appreciate it. It's a lot to keep track of. I feel like the information that was provided is kind of what I'll need. I note that there is a reconsideration process available, meaning if I produce this and someone feels like I totally missed the mark on getting information or addressing a concern they wanted, reconsideration is easy to ask for to make sure I didn't miss that. I do a couple things. I did want to make sure I got, the what is the tip show, or are there any neighborhood and area improvements? I wanted something on that. I was going to suggest maybe we'll just have the record stay open till the end of day on Friday. Just to, if anyone was hoping to participate and couldn't sort it out, right, and they reach out to city staff to convey that, they could produce their comments in lieu of live testimony tonight, because tech problems do come up, and so I would say that, and then I know I at least had requested perhaps that Ms. Underdahl submit her comments as a written comment, and I think a few others may want to do the same. I'm fine with that. But the thought being, and then give you a day and a half, a couple days to quickly get together that information on the tip, and if it takes until Tuesday, just let me know. But it's
if I can jump in.
Please do.
I actually am out of the office on Friday and Monday. Monday's a holiday. Friday's so I'm going to not be back until Tuesday. So if we could get the information to you Tuesday or shortly after, I'd appreciate it.
Let's do Tuesday. And Mr. Kim, I really appreciate your patience. I'm not trying to drag this out forever, but I also feel like better to take an extra couple days, and do it right, than rush anything. So what I'm going to do, I'll leave the record open until, we'll say 4:00, Tuesday, the 30th, not as a free for all, but the idea being folks that had their comments that they wanted to submit as written comments can do so. Like Ms. Underdahl, anyone that was unable to participate because of a tech problem, notify city staff. And then getting that specific information related to the area TIP or 6-year transportation improvement plan, and try to determine what kind of developments or what might exist in that would all be appropriate as things to be submitted. That said, Ms. Merriman, can you once more repeat the best way for folks to send stuff in? And is there a catch-all email other than just you, like a general? I don't know.
My email is my first initial and my last name, T. Merriman @ci.tumwater.wa.us. It's on the website. If you go to community development, I'm there. Also on the public hearing notice, if somebody had received that, it's on there. A link to my email address. We have an email that is to the department. It's CDD, Community Development Department, @ci.tumwater. Actually, I believe if you send it directly to me, it would be better. But if you wanted to do both, then we have a backup. Alex Baruch is also on our website. You could send it to him. He's going to be here on Friday.
That's Alex, by the way, for folks.
Pardon me. No, I lied. Wait, I
Oh.
lied. He's not here on Friday. It's his day off. So, but that would be another backup. Both he or I are on the website and could send to both.
Excellent. Okay. And Alex Baruch, thank you, by the way. We didn't introduce you earlier, but Alex is the gentleman in the room that's been helping tonight. So I think we have a plan forward, and the idea being ultimately the record then will close end of the day, or I usually say 4:00, but Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. And then it's a lot to consider. I'll take it under consideration, and I will produce a decision within a couple weeks of that. Like many others, I'm dealing with some staff shortage kind of things and backups, but my hope is to make every effort to get it done and within a couple weeks of that. And so that decision then when it comes out, for those that provided their contact information, they'll receive a copy. But in addition, Ms. Merriman, is there another way folks can receive this? Is it posted anywhere on the city's website, or folks can find it?
Yes, the notice of decision, your notice of decision will be posted on the website. We send a link to that decision to anybody who's commented, anybody that's on the mailing list, the 300-foot radius and so forth. Everybody gets that link to your decision.
Okay. Well, it's been a very long evening. I appreciate folks' patience. I'll talk one of these days to Mr. Matlock and suggest maybe we start these hearings a little earlier. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I appreciate Mr. Kim taking the time to be here, staff, including Mike Matlock, Tammy Merriman, Alex Baruch, and certainly appreciate members of the public that participated in what was a long hearing, but I will take everything I received and will receive under review and produce a decision one way or the other that is hopefully thoughtful and clear and addresses everyone's concerns. So with that, I wish everyone safety, good health. Hopefully we have some nice weather in the coming days folks can enjoy, and please enjoy the long weekend. Thank you, everybody. We'll end it here. Thanks.
Have a good evening. Thank you.